Once upon a time, there was a man I was engaged to, someone I thought I'd spend my life with. But fate had other plans, all thanks to my sister. In those dark days, I was devastated. Now, though, I found new joy, and I'm eager to share it with my sister and my ex-fiancé. My name is Catherine. I'm not stunningly beautiful, just an ordinary office worker. But once upon a time, there was a man named Bob who had promised to marry me. Bob was the handsome type with a career in a prestigious firm, the kind of guy people call the catch. We were blissfully happy in a way that made me believe it would never end. But then life's cruelty intervened. I never did marry Bob, all because of my sister. My sister's name is Sophie, and she has always had a keen interest in fashion, which she maintains to this day. Unlike me, Sophie has always been meticulous about her appearance and has always been naturally beautiful. As a result, she attracted attention from boys since middle school and even had a stint as an amateur model for a fashion magazine. Sophie harbored dreams of becoming a professional model. Meanwhile, after graduating from college and settling into a routine job at a regular company, I found myself invited to dinner by a business associate named Bob. Over time, we got to know each other better through these dinners, and unexpectedly, something began to develop between us. That evening, Bob invited me out to dinner after work. I accepted without hesitation, enjoying his company. On our way back, Bob surprised me by confessing his feelings. Though taken aback, I realized I had feelings for him too, and so began our relationship. A year later, Bob proposed, and I happily accepted. Shortly after our engagement, Bob and I visited my parents to share the news. They were delighted, and discussions about wedding plans filled our home with joy. However, not everyone shared in our happiness. That person was my younger sister, Sophie. Sophie was shocked to hear about my engagement, and even more so when she met Bob. Always popular and admired for her looks, Sophie had a history of dismissing my more reserved romantic life. "I don't want my embarrassing sister to ruin my reputation," she would often say. Seeing me, whom she considered less socially adept, marry a successful man from a prestigious company before her seemed to bruise her pride deeply. Yet I remained unaware of Sophie's true feelings, oblivious to her subtle disdain. Looking back, I should have noticed her demeanor then. One day, Sophie casually asked, "Since you're going to be my brother-in-law, can we exchange contact information?" Bob and I saw no reason to refuse, so we exchanged numbers without hesitation. As I neared the end of my job tenure, there were many late nights spent wrapping up projects. Then, on a day when my parents were away, Sophie put her plan into motion, a plan she likely devised long before. Knowing I would soon leave our family home to live with Bob, Sophie seized her opportunity. She called Bob, fabricating a story. "Bob, my sister suddenly came home sick. Our parents are out of town, and I'm feeling uneasy being alone. Could you come over?" Deceived by her ruse, Bob, who was just finishing work, rushed to our house without suspecting anything amiss. I rushed over because I heard Catherine was ill. "Where is she?" Bob's concern was palpable, and naturally, he assumed I was home. But Sophie quickly admitted, "I'm sorry, Bob. I lied to you. My sister isn't sick, she's still at work." Instead of anger, Bob responded with a puzzled expression. "Why would you lie about that?" Sophie, visibly nervous, began to explain. Meanwhile, after finishing my workday, I arrived home to an unexpected sight. Bob was there. Despite the surprise, I greeted him cheerfully. "Oh, you're here. What's up?" Little did I know, this moment would soon bring the deepest despair and sadness I had ever known. "Catherine, I'm sorry. I think we should break up." Bob's words hit me like a sudden storm. Unable to grasp their meaning at first, I stammered, "What? Are you serious? Break up? What's going on?" As I pressed for answers, Sophie entered the room, casting an uneasy atmosphere over us all. "Catherine, the truth is, I've been seeing Sophie. I'm sorry, but I've fallen in love with her more than I realized." Bob's words left me stunned and confused. Still reeling from the shock, Sophie added, "I'm sorry, Catherine, but Bob has decided to marry me." I felt utterly lost and devastated. Then Sophie, with an awkward attempt at comfort, said, "You might not want to attend our wedding ceremony, but please come to the reception, won't you?" Tears were all I could manage. Sophie had stolen my fiancé away from me. I felt abandoned, and the pain was overwhelming. My parents were deeply concerned, watching helplessly as I withdrew into my room. Having already quit my job, I felt utterly powerless. Messages from my former coworkers asking about the wedding plans only intensified my sorrow. I could only reply, explaining it would be a simple family affair. Months later, I found myself in a new and unfamiliar place, determined to begin anew and find true happiness. After the painful breakup with Bob, I had withdrawn for a time, but a newfound determination welled up inside me. Why should I continue to suffer? It was time to move on. Things progressed swiftly from there. I spoke with my parents, deciding to leave home and start afresh in a completely different environment. The new place was serene, surrounded by lush greenery. My parents supported my decision wholeheartedly, assisting me greatly with the relocation. Shortly after settling in, while taking a moment to relax, my mom approached me with surprising news. "You were in your room. Bob visited. He explained everything that happened between you two and apologized." I couldn't fathom why my parents were apologizing. What Bob had done was beyond forgiveness. Yet there they were, even kneeling in remorse. "We've also heard about Sophie. We understand you can't forgive her, Catherine, but she's our daughter too," my parents explained, visibly torn. My parents were deeply troubled by Sophie's actions, knowing the pain she had caused me. Despite their disapproval, Sophie seemed to have made her choice and went to Bob. From then on, Bob began a daily ritual of coming to our house, pleading for forgiveness and seeking approval for his marriage to Sophie. Faced with Bob's persistence, my parents eventually felt compelled to relent. That's why they apologized to me for accepting his union with Sophie. "I honestly don't dwell on it anymore, but I understand how you feel," I replied with a bittersweet smile, holding back the tears. My mom was visibly emotional, while my dad wore a pained expression of apology. Despite everything, I reassured him, "When I have children, I'll lean on you both a lot." Their faces softened into smiles at my words. Mom, still teary-eyed, added, "Don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything." As I settled into my new life and found some peace of mind, I began working at a cozy little restaurant. The team was small, but the atmosphere was bright and welcoming, which I appreciated greatly. The banter among the staff, especially the teasing directed at the manager Steve, added to the warmth of the place. A few months into my job, a pivotal event unfolded that would shape my future. It happened one evening as Steve offered me a ride home after work and confessed his feelings for me. I was taken aback and uncertain. Steve was genuinely a good guy, kind-hearted with both charm and a friendly demeanor that appealed to many. Yet I couldn't shake off the past hurt that still lingered within me. I feared the possibility of facing abandonment once again. Steve seemed to sense my hesitation and assured me there was no rush for an answer before heading home for the day. Despite the initial awkwardness, the familiar camaraderie with the part-time staff and Steve's kindness helped ease my worries. Deep down, I felt my heart had already made a decision. During a break, I discovered something about Steve's past. It turned out he had been betrayed by someone he had been dating and had a rough experience at his previous workplace before joining the restaurant. We shared a similar pain of betrayal by those we trusted. That day, I chose to accompany Steve home to listen to this story. Along the way, he opened up about his past. He had previously managed a store, but due to certain events, the store lost credibility and eventually closed down. Steve bore the brunt of the blame and lost his job as a result. After hearing Steve's story, I felt compelled to share my own reasons for being at the restaurant. When I finished, Steve looked at me kindly and said, "You've been incredibly strong." His words meant the world to me, acknowledging my resilience despite the pain I'd endured. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I did my best. Despite being betrayed by someone I loved, I managed to pick myself up, I confess, acknowledging the difficulty of my journey. To which I added sincerely, "You've done amazingly well too." Steve's smile grew wider, and in that moment, I found the courage to respond to his earlier confession. "Since that day, I might be a handful, but I hope you'll be patient with me," I told him. From then on, the teasing from the part-timers at the restaurant increased, but it was all in good spirit. "Congratulations. Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness." They cheered, genuinely happy for us. "That's a bit premature. There's a right time for that line, and it'll come around again. When it does, you'd better let me say it," Steve teased, a bit flustered as I laughed along with everyone else. It was a moment of pure joy, a typical day in our lives, until things took a turn. For the second time in my life, I was proposed to. Without hesitation, I accepted, determined to find lasting happiness this time. I believed Steve was the one who could truly make me happy. I visited my parents' house for the first time in a while to share the news, and they were overjoyed. Opening up about Steve, I felt their support as they said, "Please make our daughter happy. We trust you." "I will make Catherine happy," he asserted confidently. After chatting for a while, my dad hesitated before sharing, "Sophie and Bob are going to get married." He mentioned that an invitation might arrive, but insisted I needn't worry about it. Truthfully, I wasn't bothered. I was too wrapped up in my own happiness. In fact, I wanted to celebrate it openly. When I expressed this to my parents, they responded warmly, "If Catherine feels that way, then we trust your judgment." Sure enough, a few days later, an invitation to Sophie's wedding arrived. I decided we would attend together. Dave and I had opted for a simple legal marriage due to Sophie's impending wedding. We felt it would be less overwhelming for our parents and relatives to stagger our celebrations. We promised ourselves a proper wedding ceremony once things had settled down. On the date of Sophie's wedding, Steve and I arrived together at the venue. It had been a while since we had seen Sophie and Bob. Bob appeared weary, and there was a tension in the air as we exchanged greetings and introductions with family. When I proudly introduced Steve as my husband, Sophie's reaction was visibly surprised, etching the moment into memory. During the event, I found myself wanting to ask Bob about what had transpired between him and Sophie on the day when neither my parents nor I were present. Bob initially hesitated but eventually began to confide in me. According to him, when Sophie called him that day and informed him falsely that I was suddenly ill, Bob decided to wait for me. Sophie then arrived with strong drinks, coaxing him to indulge. Despite not being a heavy drinker, Bob had a few too many and became intoxicated. In his vulnerable state, Sophie took advantage of the situation, seducing him. Bob admitted that Sophie's beauty and allure played a role in clouding his judgment. Despite our engagement, he succumbed to temptation, and from then on, his attention began to drift towards Sophie. After hearing Bob's confession, his repeated apologies seemed insignificant to me. Honestly, I felt indifferent. What mattered most was finally knowing the truth. Meanwhile, Steve and Sophie were engaged in a conversation nearby. I was curious about their discussion but decided to inquire later, considering Sophie's upcoming wedding. On our way home, I couldn't resist asking Steve, "Were you upset when you were talking to Sophie?" Steve sighed. "As I mentioned before, she's my ex who betrayed me. But that's not all. She's also the reason I lost my job." I was taken aback. It felt like such a small world, and learning that Sophie was directly responsible for the closure of Steve's shop added another layer of shock. I delved deeper into the situation. It turned out that a few months into Sophie's relationship with Steve, she had an affair with a designer. Sophie believed dating someone in the modeling industry would be more advantageous, despite already being with Steve. When Steve discovered this by chance, he understandably confronted Sophie. However, instead of remorse, Sophie became angry and the relationship ended abruptly. Sophie's anger didn't dissipate. She went further, fabricating a fake photo of foreign objects and dishes from Steve's restaurant and shared it on social media. Given her modeling career, she had a substantial following, and the photos quickly went viral. The negative publicity reached Steve's boss, who had entrusted the business to him amid declining profits. The resulting closure of the restaurant led to Steve losing his job, with him unfairly shouldering the blame. Steve harbored deep resentment over the incident. Not knowing the true culprit behind the fabricated photo, he was left without a target for his anger. Amidst the turmoil, Steve finally discovered the truth during a casual drink with a friend. His girlfriend's friend had seen Sophie boasting on social media about causing the closure of a restaurant. Unaware that the restaurant belonged to Steve, the friend relayed this information to Steve. Though Steve now knew who was responsible, it was too late to take any action, so he resolved to make a fresh start elsewhere. It was then that Steve and I crossed paths. I approached Steve with an apology. "I'm sorry for what my sister did. I'm the sister of the person who caused so much trouble in your life. I didn't know how to face you. I was afraid you might hate me." Steve's response was unexpectedly kind. "It's all in the past, Catherine. None of this was your fault." His words brought me immense relief, reaffirming our decision to pursue happiness together once more. Later, Sophie faced consequences for her actions. She had arranged a photo shoot at an unexpected location, our home, known for its lush greenery and picturesque backdrop, ideal for modeling. The shoot was evidently part of her ambition to pursue a modeling career. The incident took place during dinner at a restaurant she had visited, which happened to be Steve's. Since I no longer worked at Steve's restaurant, I heard about this incident afterward. Upon recognizing Sophie at the entrance, Steve promptly intervened, stating firmly, I'm sorry, but I can't allow you to enter. He refused Sophie and her group access, prompting the staff to inquire about the situation. Steve proceeded to disclose Sophie's past actions and the hardships he had endured because of her. She has a criminal record, and I have evidence to support it. I can't risk a repeat of past troubles, so I must refuse her entry. There was stunned silence among the staff, and Sophie visibly paled at Steve's words. Moreover, Steve declared his intention to inform the president of the company where Sophie was poised to start about her troubled history. The individual who had scouted Sophie was taken aback and urged Steve to reconsider, but Steve remained resolute in his decision. As a result, Sophie's scheduled photoshoot was canceled, and news of the incident spread throughout the industry, shattering her aspirations of becoming a model. No one wanted to associate with someone who had caused such a significant scandal in the past. Adding to this, I learned from my mom that Bob's company had been experiencing declining performance lately, and he was now under consideration for demotion. She appeared concerned about what the future held for both of them. Despite the tumultuous events, Steve and I continued to enjoy our days together happily. Today marks the eve of our long-awaited wedding. We've both overcome challenges in the past, but now we're filled with joy. There's also a new life growing within me. Congratulations. Wishing you a lifetime of happiness. The staff from the restaurant where we first met cheerfully repeat this familiar phrase. Thank you, I respond gratefully, stating before everyone, I pledge to cherish our family always and to seek happiness forevermore.
You really think wearing that will make a good impression? Ethan's words echoed in my mind as I stared at my reflection. I smoothed my hands over the simple black dress I had chosen for dinner with his parents tonight. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was me. Or at least, I thought it was until now. Doubts swirled as I recalled Ethan's tone when he saw my outfit earlier. Was he right? Maybe I should have worn something more formal and elegant. But as an emerging artist barely scraping by, my wardrobe was limited. I sighed, pushing the negative thoughts away. I had to stop second-guessing myself. The doorbell rang and I took a deep breath. It was now or never. Ethan greeted me with a weak smile and a peck on the cheek. We drove in tense silence to his parents' lavish downtown apartment. I gazed up at the sleek high-rise apprehensively. Don't worry, you look great, Ethan finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. My doubts returned, but before I could respond, we were stepping into the cold marble foyer. The sound of my modest heels echoed loudly. Ethan, so good of you to come, a tall, imposing man greeted us, Ethan's father, Harold. His eyes moved to me, looking me up and down critically. And you must be. Marina, is it? I nodded, extending my hand. He shook it limply before turning away. Come in, come in. Dinner's just being served. The expansive apartment was impeccably decorated, with artwork adorning the walls and luxurious furnishings throughout. I sat awkwardly at the large dining table across from Ethan and his parents. An ornate chandelier hung above us. So, Marina, Ethan tells me you're an artist? Harold asked after the salad course was served. Yes, I'm focused on mixed media collage, I replied. Harold raised his eyebrows. Mixed media collage? Can't say I'm familiar with that particular medium. Oh, it involves incorporating various materials like papers, fabrics, natural objects. My voice trailed off under his skeptical gaze. An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. Well, I'm sure it's very avant-garde, Harold finally said dismissively. But you must realize very few artists actually make a living from such endeavors, right? I stared down at my plate, my cheeks burning. Where was Ethan in all this? Why wasn't he defending me? I snuck a glance at him, but he seemed completely oblivious, consumed with his food. Of course, Harold continued, art is a wonderful hobby for a young woman like yourself, but you need a practical career as well, like finance or law. Don't you agree, Ethan? Ethan looked up, nodding meekly. You make a fair point, Dad. I gritted my teeth, humiliation washing over me. The rest of the dinner passed painfully until finally, it was over. Ethan and I rode the elevator down to the car in silence. It wasn't until we were driving away that he finally spoke. I'm really sorry about my dad, he said half-heartedly. You know how traditional and superficial he can be. I just stared out the window, holding back angry tears. Maybe this relationship was a mistake after all. The weekend after the disastrous dinner, I found myself reluctantly agreeing to a second meeting with Ethan's family. Part of me wanted to end things then and there, But another part still clung to the hope that maybe it was just first impressions. Maybe if I tried again, they would see me for who I really am. Ethan seemed genuinely apologetic about his dad's behavior. "Just give him another chance," he pleaded. "He's old-fashioned, but I know if he gets to know you better, he'll come around." I finally acquiesced, though I knew deep down it was a long shot. Harold and the rest of Ethan's family cared about one thing only: status. Still, I had to try for Ethan's sake. I decided to meet with my mentor Louise beforehand, hoping she could provide some encouragement. She was the one who had first encouraged me to pursue art, even when others said it was impractical. "This boy should be standing up for you," Louise said as we sipped tea in her cozy kitchen. "If he doesn't appreciate who you are, then he's not worth it." Her words resonated with me. I had compromised myself too much for Ethan, dimming my light to avoid outshining his inferiority complex. His weakness revealed the hollowness at the core of his ostentatious family. Their lives were dictated by petty hierarchies and prejudices. I left Louise's house with newfound clarity and a bold idea. I decided I would wear one of her pieces, an exquisite jacket made of paper, cardboard, and fabric scraps, to the family dinner. I knew Harold would scoff at it for looking like arts and crafts, but its beauty stemmed from Louise's brilliant technique of transforming discarded materials into art. The night of the dinner came. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened the final button on the jacket. This was my line in the sand. Ethan clearly felt some trepidation when he arrived to pick me up. "That jacket's different," he noted delicately. I lifted my chin, steadying my resolve. "Yes, it's one of a kind, like me." He nodded, looking away awkwardly. My courage grew. At Harold's apartment, I immediately felt his scornful glare on my outfit. But before he could deride it, I spoke up proudly. "My jacket was handmade by Louise Sanders. I'm sure you've heard of her brilliant found object creations." Harold paused, seeming temporarily impressed. "Louise Sanders? Isn't she that new avant-garde designer featured in Vogue last month?" "The one and the same," I confirmed. "Oh yes, of course," Harold exclaimed with forced enthusiasm. "Her work with recycled materials is so innovative." I smiled victoriously as we sat down to dinner. For once, the power dynamic felt shifted in my favor. Ethan kept grinning at me appreciatively throughout the meal, but Harold's superficiality shone through once again as he remarked, "You know, Marina, with Louise Sanders' pieces skyrocketing in value, you really should consider auctioning off that jacket. I'm sure you could make a tidy sum. You clearly have a good eye for fashion." I nearly choked on my wine. Even now, he could only see the monetary value of art and creativity. Louise and I were vessels for him to increase his fortune and prestige. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. When Ethan dropped me home, I felt nothing but disdain roiling inside me. The time had come for me to stand up and walk away from this toxic, vacuous family. After the second disastrous dinner with Ethan's family, I found myself at a crossroads. The blatant disrespect and condescension I had experienced left me reeling. I knew I deserved better, but a small part of me still clung to the hope that our relationship could be salvaged. Ethan kept apologizing and begging me for another chance. "It will be different this time, I promise," he pleaded. "Just give them one more chance to get to know the real you." I was reluctant. The first 2 meetings had gone terribly, leaving me feeling belittled and small. But maybe I owed it to Ethan to try one last time before walking away for good. Before agreeing to anything, I met with my mentor Louise again, seeking her wisdom. She listened thoughtfully as I recounted the details of that night: Harold's dismissiveness towards my career, the passive aggression masked as superficial compliments. Louise shook her head, a hint of anger in her eyes. "This whole family sounds toxic, Marina. Sometimes you have to know when enough is enough." I knew she was right. I had compromised myself time and again to appease their egos. I deserved to be with someone who valued me for who I was. Still, there was a tiny part of me that hoped Ethan would finally stand up for me if I gave him this one last chance. I decided to agree to a final dinner, but I would do it on my own terms this time. No more diminishing myself for their comfort. When Ethan arrived to pick me up, I wore an even bolder outfit, adorned with pieces from several emerging designers. I could see the surprise in Ethan's eyes, but he said nothing as we drove to meet his parents. At dinner, Harold's eyes lingered on my clothes with unveiled disdain. Before he could make a snide remark, I spoke up. I'm wearing some new designers. Ones who are doing groundbreaking work experimenting with sustainable materials. Since you have such an interest in fashion, I thought you'd appreciate these conscious pieces. Harold's mouth snapped shut, unable to formulate a response. The rest of Ethan's family shifted uncomfortably. As dinner progressed, I continued speaking out passionately about my beliefs, challenging their superficial mindsets. With each word, I felt myself reclaiming my power. Ethan watched me with a stunned expression, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. Finally, Harold sneered, "What's gotten into you tonight, Marina? This new attitude of yours is quite off-putting." I smiled calmly as I stood up from my seat. With all due respect, nothing has gotten into me. This is who I have been all along. But instead of appreciating that, you have dismissed and belittled me at every turn. I see now that our values are simply incompatible. Ethan, I'm sorry, but we're over. I wish you and your family all the best. With that, I turned and walked away from that life forever, my head held high. I stepped out into the night feeling freer than I had in years. It was time for me to focus on people who would value me for who I was. This experience had given me the strength and clarity I needed to live authentically without compromising my integrity ever again. After walking out on Ethan and his family, I was filled with a new sense of purpose. The ultimate revenge would be showing them I could thrive without their approval or validation. I decided to put all my energy into an upcoming gallery showcase organized by my mentor Louise. She had curated an exhibit featuring work from young avant-garde artists like myself. It was the perfect opportunity to announce myself to the Chicago art scene. My centerpiece would be a mixed-media sculpture I had been working on for months, incorporating materials scavenged from thrift stores and garage sales. Each piece represented a fragmented memory from my relationship with Ethan. I wanted to transform that experience into impactful art. In the weeks leading up to the exhibit, I worked day and night on my sculpture. Using blue torches, power tools, and adhesives, I obsessively shaped wire, broken mirror shards, rusted metal, and tattered fabrics into an abstract human form. When the piece was finally complete, Louise came by my studio to see it. I watched nervously as she circled it, taking in every angle. Finally, she spoke. "This is your best work yet, Marina. So raw and yet beautiful. It will stun people." Her validation filled me with confidence. This was the moment I would stake my claim as an important young artist, and Ethan's family would regret ever dismissing me. On the night of the opening, I could hardly breathe as people began trickling into the gallery. The lights illuminated my sculpture provocatively, its jagged edges and distorted shape confrontational, yet captivating. I mingled nervously, awaiting people's reactions, but as I glanced around the room, I did a double take. There in the corner were none other than Ethan and his parents. Our eyes met briefly before Ethan looked away awkwardly. What were they doing here? Louise must have included them on the invite list before everything happened. I watched as they made their way slowly around the exhibit, Harold looking bored and unimpressed. Finally, they came upon my sculpture. They stared at it silently, confusion etched on their faces. Harold turned to me. "You made this thing?" he asked in a patronizing tone. I stepped towards them boldly. "Yes. This sculpture represents my personal journey over the past year, transforming pain into art." Harold snorted derisively. "Well, I can't say I understand it. A little too avant-garde for my taste." I stood tall, holding his gaze. "Maybe you're just not looking closely enough." Around us, other attendees began taking notice of the tense interaction. Voices murmured, "Isn't that Marina Caldwell, the artist?" Harold shifted uncomfortably under the attention. For once, I felt in control. This was my space, my world. I spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If you'll excuse me, I should continue mingling. So glad you could make it to see my work." With that, I turned and rejoined the crowd, leaving them to reckon with a world they could neither understand nor control. My moment of retaliation was complete. In the weeks following the art gallery showcase, I thrilled in the glow of my newfound success. The local press had raved about my bold and confrontational sculpture. My piece was now in high demand, with offers coming in from collectors across the country. After years of struggling and doubting myself, I was finally being recognized on my own terms. and knowing that Ethan's arrogant family had borne witness to my talent blossoming made it all the sweeter. One morning, I arrived at my studio to find an ornate envelope waiting on my work table. The return address was Ethan's parents' downtown high-rise. Curiosity mixed with apprehension as I tore it open. The heavy cardstock invitation announced the opening of a new contemporary art gallery in their building. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Ethan's mother. Dear Marina, your remarkable work at Louise's recent showcase inspired Harold and I to venture into the art world ourselves. We would be honored if you would attend the grand opening of our gallery next weekend. We truly hope to see your sculpture displayed at the space one day. Warmly, Elizabeth first nearly burst out laughing. They wanted me to be part of their vanity project? After years of scorn and dismissal towards my craft, I decided I would attend their opening, if only to see them humiliate themselves trying to fit into my world. That Saturday, I dressed in an avant-garde, daring outfit and walked into their pristine gallery space. One glance confirmed it was exactly as I expected. All style over substance. Trendy, abstract paintings adorned the walls, clearly chosen by an overpriced consultant. Ethan's parents rushed towards me eagerly. Marina, so delighted you could come, gushed Elizabeth. Harold grinned next to her. We'd love to give you a tour of the space, he offered. As we meandered through the rooms, they name-dropped artists and raved about each meaningless piece. I hid my smirk. Finally, we arrived at the back room. We've saved the best for last, Elizabeth said. They stepped aside, revealing my sculpture prominently displayed. We acquired this from Louise's gallery, Harold announced proudly. It's the crown jewel of our collection. I froze, rage simmering through me. You bought my piece? I asked incredulously. Well, we wanted to showcase the city's best emerging talent, Elizabeth trilled. My anger spilled over. Talent which you did nothing but deride and dismiss for years, I shot back. You don't get to buy your way into my world when it's convenient for you. I barged past their shocked faces and stormed out, refusing to let them taint my success for their vanity. My work was never for sale to the likes of them. The look on their faces was payment enough for me. In the aftermath of the disastrous art gallery opening, I refused to let Ethan's family intimidate me into submission. If anything, their brazen attempt to acquire my work had lit a fire in me. I was more determined than ever to call them out in a public, scathing act of defiance. Louise cautioned me to take the high road. Their actions already reflect poorly on them, she said gently. You don't need to stoop to their level. But my anger and hurt went deeper than logic. I decided to attend a prestigious charity benefit that I knew Ethan's family would be at. It was time for a very public reckoning. I wore a simple black sheath dress and an icy expression as I entered the ballroom, immediately spotting Ethan and his parents holding court. As we locked eyes, I noted nervousness in Harold's face, but I didn't plan to confront them directly. That would be too kind. During the program, a wealthy benefactor took the stage to announce a major donation. I recognized him from the newspaper, a real estate mogul who had ruthlessly bought up low-income housing and displaced families, all in the name of progress. When polite applause sounded, I stood up and booed loudly. Shocked faces turned to me. Before anyone could react, I strode onto the stage and grabbed the microphone. This man deserves condemnation, not celebration. I declared passionately to the stunned crowd. He is responsible for rampant gentrification and suffering of the vulnerable. His donation is blood money. Murmurs arose as security rushed towards me, but I continued staring defiantly until they hauled me away. The story would make headlines tomorrow, I knew. Ethan appeared at my side as I was escorted out. Marina, what were you thinking? He hissed. I met his eyes unwaveringly. The better question is, what are you thinking? Aligning yourself with these toxic elites, letting them stomp on others. My voice rose with anger. You've thrown away every good thing between us to worship at the altar of greed and status. I stepped closer and spat out my final blow. You and your whole damned family deserve each other. I shoved past Ethan, leaving him speechless amidst the swirling chaos. My heels clicked across the marble lobby as I strode outside with my head held high, finally free of their grasp. The next weeks passed in a blur. My defiant act had gone viral, with many lauding me as a champion for justice. Galleries and universities invited me to speak. my calendar filled with events and interviews. One morning, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Ethan holding a single red rose. Before he could speak, I stepped forward and shut the door firmly in his face. I had nothing left to say to him or his family. My sights were set on a new horizon now. Let Ethan's privileged world crumble under the weight of its own rotten foundation. I would continue shining light on those they had trampled. With my new platform, I was only getting started. In the weeks after I publicly denounced Ethan's family, fallout from the scandal spread steadily through Chicago's elite circles. Whispers followed Ethan's parents everywhere, with friends and colleagues carefully avoiding them at social events. Their real estate empire took a hit as partners withdrew investments, not wanting the negative publicity. Harold responded by trying to smooth things over, penning op-eds and making appearances at charity events, but his desperate attempts to salvage his family's reputation only made things worse. Meanwhile, my career catapulted to new heights. The fame from my defiant, viral act earned me features in major publications. Galleries clamored to host my work. Invitations poured in for speaking engagements across the country. It was a gratifying vindication after years of patronization from Ethan's family. They had sneered at my unsophisticated art, oblivious to the raw talent right under their noses. How quickly the tides had changed. At my recent openings, I scanned the room, almost hoping to witness Harold and Elizabeth attending like scorned groupies. But of course, they were too humiliated to show their faces now. One evening, I arrived home to find an envelope wedged in my door. My guard immediately went up, thinking it was another pathetic plea from Ethan. But the return address was from Louise's gallery. Inside was a printed email between her and a writer for ArtNet News. "Hello, Louise. I'm working on a piece about Chicago's rising art stars and would love to feature Marina Caldwell. Her scathing manifesto against elitism took real courage. Do you have quotes you could contribute about her talent and integrity? Many thanks, Sam." I hugged the note to my chest, Louise's words warming me. Marina has always had a vision and voice far beyond her years. She turns injustice into art that makes you think and feel. Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning for her. After the darkness of recent months, it was profoundly moving to read Louise's unwavering support laid out. No matter what vitriol or opposition I faced, she believed in my gifts. I penned a heartfelt letter to Louise, thanking her for standing by me. I hoped one day I could be that kind of mentor to an emerging creative spirit. That was the only power and legacy I aspired to now. Let Ethan and his family cling to their dwindling status and wealth, constantly looking over their shoulders. I didn't need them or their world. I had everything I needed, my voice, my vision, and people who genuinely nurtured my talents rather than exploiting them. And that was worth more than they could ever grasp. In the weeks following the explosive will reading, I threw myself into learning the brewery business. As Dad's handpicked successor, I needed to understand every aspect of the company now under my stewardship. I toured the grounds, talking with employees and learning their roles hands-on. The seasoned workers taught me the intricate brewing process, from selecting premium ingredients right down to bottling and distribution. As I reviewed accounting records, the picture came into clear focus. Dad built this empire from the ground up, showing me the deeper meaning behind his years of endless work. The company meant far more than profit margins to him. It meant community, jobs for hundreds, partnerships with local farms, families sustained for generations. The brewery wove lives together in a way I never fully appreciated until now. Late one evening, as I finalized a new hire's papers, loud shouts rang out from the parking lot. I rushed outside to investigate. My gut tightened at what I saw. Evelyn and Declan stood screaming at Tham, Dad's loyal head brewer of 20 years. In the shadows lurked several suited men with hard expressions. Evelyn's usually polished blonde hair hung in frazzled strands as she jabbed a finger at Tham. "You have no right to block us," she shrilled. "Marshall promised us control." Tham stood firm, arms crossed. "This is Mr. Ryder's brewery now, as Mr. Marshall wanted. I aim to uphold his wishes." Declan grabbed Tom's shirt, wrenching the older man close. "Tell us the access codes to the system mainframe now," he growled, "or my associates will convince you the hard way." The suited men cracked their knuckles, malice glinting in their eyes. Tom paled but lifted his chin. "I won't betray Mr. Marshall's son. Do your worst." Rage exploded within me. I stalked forward, muscles coiled tight. "Let him go!" My shout echoed sharply. Everyone froze. Evelyn recovered first, her smile dripping false sweetness. "Ryder, darling, we were just having a chat with Tom here." I cut through her facade with a blistering glare. "Get off my property, now." Declan released Tom hastily as they scrambled to their car. Pausing, Evelyn hissed at me, "You'll pay for this," before peeling out down the road. I watched them go, chest heaving. So now they resorted to threats and violence, revealing desperation to reclaim what they considered their lost inheritance. Well, that was never happening. I turned to Tom, who gave me a grateful nod. In that small gesture, I recognized the deeper bond of trust Dad and Tom shared now flowing to me. As we walked back inside, steely purpose took root within me. Evelyn and Declan wanted war? Fine. For the brewery, for Dad and for Tom, I would give them absolute hell. No more playing nice. That time ended when they laid hands on my people and tried dismantling Dad's legacy. If those snakes wanted a fight, I would rain fire on their ambitions until only ashes remained. My father's company now lived through me, and I protected what was mine. Years had passed since I walked away from Ethan and his toxic family. In that time, my career and self-confidence flourished beyond what I could have imagined. After publicly calling them out, doors opened for me to elevate other unheard voices through my art. Galleries and universities gave me platforms to share searing work exposing social injustice. My days filled with passion and purpose as I collaborated with inspiring minds. The fame and fortune were secondary. I treasured the connections most of all. Of course, the curiosity lingered about whatever became of Ethan and his parents after their spectacular downfall. I caught occasional rumors of them selling off assets and withdrawing from the public eye. But I felt no desire to follow up or relish their suffering. I had made my point and moved on. Their world held no appeal for me anymore, nor any power over my life path. One morning, an envelope arrived containing a wedding invitation from my friend Sophie, another artist and outspoken spirit. I smiled, remembering late nights working together in my cramped studio, dreaming of the day our voices would be heard. That evening, I eagerly attended her show, first displaying the two of us as young hopefuls. Seeing our unjaded faces juxtaposed with who we had become was profoundly moving. Pride welled up in me for Sophie, and for my own growth. As I gazed at the photos, one figure standing sullenly in the corner caught my eye. Ethan. A part of our history together I had forgotten. Sophie noticed my stare and came over. "Ancient history," she said, squeezing my shoulder. I nodded, letting the past dissolve once more. At Sophie's wedding the next weekend, I toasted her and her husband, celebrating the power of love between partners who see each other fully. No pretense or jockeying for control, just joyful union. My own romantic life had seen ups and downs over the years. I endured some hard lessons on the path to knowing my worth, but I approached relationships now with wisdom to recognize truth and reciprocity. During the reception, Sophie's father Ron, a retired steelworker, approached me. "I'm so thankful Sophie had you as a friend starting out," he said gruffly. "You always valued her for who she really is." I squeezed his calloused hand, overcome with emotion. This was the only legacy I cared about, lifting up others so their light could shine. As a new day dawned, I awoke filled with gratitude for the hard-won lessons that shaped me. I had broken free from toxic expectations and found my voice. What lay ahead I didn't know, but I would meet it boldly, without compromise. The moonlight spilled across the room, casting a serene glow on what should have been a peaceful honeymoon suite. But the tranquility was a facade, shattered by hushed voices that sliced through the stillness and into my heart. Ethan's words, laced with deceit, were like venom. "She's asleep. It's a real shame it's not you I'm marrying, Natalie." I lay still, my heart pounding in my chest. I was supposed to be sleeping, lost in dreams of our new life together. Instead, I was a silent spectator to my own betrayal. The cold realization settled in. My sister Natalie and my husband Ethan were plotting against me. On our honeymoon. "Ethan, you're wicked." Natalie's voice was soft coo, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "But what if Lauren finds out?" "She won't. I've made sure of that." Ethan's confidence was chilling. Tears threatened to escape, but I willed them back. I couldn't reveal my awareness. Not yet. I needed to know more, to understand the depth of their treachery. As their whispers faded into the night, my mind raced. The memories of our wedding day, once vibrant and joyful, now twisted into a cruel joke. Natalie, always in the shadows, waiting to snatch what was mine. And Ethan, the man I had loved and trusted, the architect of my heartbreak. I remembered the white dress Natalie wore at the wedding, how it stood out, a deliberate choice to upstage me. Ethan's compliment to her then made sense now, a signal of their hidden alliance. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, painting a picture of deceit I couldn't ignore. When dawn broke, I rose from the bed, a plan forming in my mind. I was Lauren Harper, and if they thought they could play me for a fool, they were sorely mistaken. I was going to fight back, not just for my pride, but for every moment they had stolen from me. I slipped out of the room, my steps silent but determined. The cool morning air was a balm to my seething anger. I needed evidence, undeniable proof of their betrayal. It was the only way to ensure they couldn't wriggle out of their web of lies. Returning to the room, I found Ethan and Natalie in a seemingly innocent breakfast conversation, but the undercurrent of their secret was palpable. I joined them, my facade of ignorance perfectly in place. "How did you sleep, Lauren?" Ethan asked, his voice a sickening blend of concern and deceit. "Like a baby," I lied, my voice steady. "I feel completely refreshed." Natalie smiled, but her eyes couldn't mask the guilt. "That's great. Today's going to be amazing." Yes, it would be, but not in the way they expected. The morning sun glared through the windows, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within me. As Ethan and Natalie chatted about the day's plans, my mind wandered back to the wedding, the day when the seeds of deception were sown. The memory of Natalie in her white dress at my wedding was vivid, an intentional act of defiance against unwritten social rules. The dress wasn't just an outfit choice, it was a statement, a silent declaration of her intentions. Ethan had complimented her, "That flowy dress suits your petite frame." His words, once innocuous, now echoed with hidden meaning. I remembered feeling a twinge of unease then, quickly dismissed as wedding day jitters. But it was more than that. It was my intuition sensing the undercurrents of betrayal. The way Ethan's eyes lingered on Natalie, the stolen glances they thought I hadn't noticed. Our honeymoon in Bali was supposed to be an escape, a celebration of our love. Yet here I was, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. The realization that Natalie had followed us here was like a punch to the gut. How could she? How could they? I excused myself from breakfast under the pretext of needing fresh air. Alone on the balcony, I allowed myself a moment of vulnerability. The tears came then, hot and unrelenting, but with each tear shed my resolve hardened. I wiped my face, my tears not a sign of weakness, but fuel for the fire of revenge burning within me. Back in our room, I began my plan. I needed evidence, something concrete to expose them. I rummaged through Ethan's belongings when he was in the shower, looking for any proof of their affair. Then, in his coat pocket, I found it. A small piece of jewelry, a locket I had never seen before, unmistakably feminine. I held the locket, a tangible piece of their deceit. It was more than enough to start my retribution. I placed it back carefully, covering my tracks. They wouldn't know I was onto them, not until I was ready to strike. The rest of the day was a blur, a performance of the happy bride while my mind plotted their downfall. Each smile, each touch from Ethan was a lie that added to the ledger of his betrayal. And Natalie, playing the role of the doting sister, was no better. As night fell and they retreated to their secret rendezvous, I lay awake. My heart was a battleground of sorrow and rage. But amidst the chaos, one thing was clear. They had underestimated me. Lauren Harper was not a victim. She was a woman scorned, and she would have her revenge. The following days in Bali were a masterclass in deception. Ethan and Natalie believed their secret safe, but I was watching, gathering the pieces of their treachery to weave their downfall. I started by accidentally leaving my phone recording in our room when I knew they'd be alone. The things they said, their words were like daggers. "Lauren's nice and all, but she's so naive," Natalie chuckled. Ethan's reply was a twist of the knife. "That's what makes this easy. She trusts us completely." Hearing my sister and husband mock my trust was a searing pain, a betrayal that transcended heartbreak. But it fueled my resolve. This recording was the evidence I needed, but I wanted more. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the pain they caused me. One evening, as we strolled along the beach, I brought up our wedding. "Ethan, didn't Natalie look stunning in that white dress? Almost like a bride herself," I said, my voice laced with feigned innocence. Ethan stuttered, his facade cracking. "Well, yeah, it was a nice dress." Natalie shot him a look, a silent warning. "Oh, it was just a dress, Lauren. You were the star, of course." Their discomfort was palpable, a small victory in my silent war. But my greatest move came the night before we were to leave Bali. I had convinced them to have a farewell dinner, a toast to our wonderful honeymoon. Little did they know, I had arranged for a private investigator to take photos of their secret meetings. As we raised our glasses, I smiled, the predator, not the prey. "To new beginnings," I toasted, my words heavy with unspoken meaning. "To new beginnings," they echoed, unaware of the storm on the horizon. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of the life I had envisioned with Ethan, of the future we were supposed to have. But that life was a lie, one I was no longer willing to live. Tomorrow, I would leave Bali, but I wouldn't be leaving alone. I would be taking their secrets, their lies, and turning them into weapons of my own. The journey back from Bali was a silent one. Ethan and Natalie chatted idly, unaware of the storm brewing within me. As we landed, I felt a sense of liberation, the chains of their deceit no longer holding me. At home, I acted quickly. I contacted a lawyer, presenting the evidence I had gathered. The recordings, the locket, and the photos from the investigator painted a clear picture of Ethan and Natalie's affair. My lawyer, a stern-faced woman with a sharp mind, was appalled. "We'll make sure they get what they deserve, Lauren." That evening, as Ethan returned from work, I greeted him with a smile, masking the turmoil inside. "How was your day, dear?" I asked, my voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "It was good, busy as usual," he replied, oblivious to the undercurrents. Natalie, who had come over for dinner, added, "You must be exhausted, Ethan. Let me get you a drink." Watching them, a sense of disgust washed over me. How could they be so callous, so cruel? Dinner was a charade. Ethan and Natalie played their parts well, but I could see the cracks in their armor. Every smile, every touch between them was a confession of their guilt. "Lauren, this dish is amazing," Ethan complimented, his words hollow. I smiled, my heart hardening. "I'm glad you like it. I wanted to make something special tonight." As the night wore on, I excused myself, citing tiredness. Alone in my room, I finalized my plans. Tomorrow, I would confront them, expose their lies for all to see. I had arranged for our families to meet under the guise of a belated wedding celebration. It would be the perfect stage for my revelation. The next morning, as we gathered at the venue, the tension was palpable. Ethan and Natalie were nervous, their smiles strained. Our families chatted, unaware of the drama about to unfold. I stood, glass in hand, commanding the room's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," I began, my voice steady. "To truth and honesty, the foundation of any relationship." Ethan's eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing through them. Natalie's hand trembled ever so slightly. "To truth and honesty," the room echoed, raising their glasses. The moment had come. "I have something to share," I announced, my voice ringing clear. "Something about Ethan and Natalie." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The moment when the mask of deceit would fall, and their true faces would be revealed for all to see. The air in the room was thick with anticipation as I faced our families and the two people who had betrayed me the most. Ethan and Natalie looked like deer caught in headlights, their facades crumbling under the weight of impending exposure. "I've discovered something unsettling," I began, my voice unwavering. "Ethan and Natalie have been having an affair, since before our wedding." Gasps filled the room. Ethan's face drained of color, while Natalie's eyes darted around, looking for an escape that didn't exist. "This can't be true," Ethan stammered, his voice betraying him. Natalie chimed in, her tone desperate. "Lauren, you're mistaken. This is crazy." I held up my phone, playing the recording of their conversation in Bali. Their own words filled the room, irrefutable proof of their deceit. "You're lying." Ethan's facade broke, anger replacing the fear. "You invaded our privacy." "Our privacy?" I echoed, my voice laced with scorn. "The privacy to betray me, your wife?" Natalie's eyes were filled with tears, but they sparked no sympathy in me. "Lauren, please, I never meant for this to happen. It just what, Natalie? Just happened to fall in love with my husband?" My voice was icy, cutting through her excuses. Ethan turned to our families, pleading, "This isn't what it looks like. Lauren's just upset." My father stood up, his expression a mix of anger and disappointment. "Ethan, how could you do this to our daughter? And Natalie, you're her sister!" The room erupted into chaos, with family members voicing their shock and disgust. Amidst the turmoil, I remained calm, the eye of the storm. This was the retribution I had sought, the exposure of their true selves. Ethan's mother approached me, her eyes filled with sadness. "Lauren, I am so sorry. We never knew Ethan could do something like this." Natalie was sobbing now, her image of the innocent sister shattered. "I'm sorry, Lauren. I never wanted to hurt you." Their apologies were empty, meaningless. The damage was done, the betrayal too deep. "I want a divorce, Ethan," I stated firmly. "And Natalie, consider our sisterhood over." As I walked out of the room, leaving behind the shattered pieces of what was once my life, I felt a surge of empowerment. They thought they could break me, but I emerged stronger, like the architect of their downfall. In the wake of the revelation, the fallout was immediate and severe. Ethan and Natalie found themselves isolated, their actions casting them adrift in a sea of judgment and scorn. I met Ethan one last time to finalize the divorce proceedings. He was a shadow of the confident man he once was, his eyes hollow with loss. "Lauren, can't we talk about this? I know I made a mistake, but—" "A mistake, Ethan?" I cut him off, my voice cold and unyielding. "You call an affair with my sister a mistake? There's nothing to discuss." He reached out, but I stepped back, out of his reach forever. "I never thought you'd take it this far," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "You never thought at all, Ethan. That was your mistake." With that, I left him standing alone, a man undone by his own actions. Natalie fared no better. Our parents, once her staunch defenders, were appalled by her behavior. They cut her off, both financially and emotionally. She tried to reach out to me, her messages a mix of apologies and pleas for understanding. "Lauren, please, I'm your sister. We can fix this," she texted. Her words a desperate clawing for redemption. I replied with a single sentence that severed our bond for good. "You ceased being my sister the moment you betrayed me." The community around us was unforgiving. Ethan's career suffered as his reputation crumbled. Natalie found herself ostracized, her social circle closing its doors to her. They were pariahs, their names synonymous with betrayal and deceit. In their downfall, I found a bitter satisfaction. They had underestimated me, thought they could use me as a pawn in their selfish game. But I turned the tables, exposing them for who they truly were. Yet, even in victory, there was a sense of loss. The end of my marriage, the severing of ties with my sister. These were wounds that would take time to heal. But I was determined to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I watched Ethan and Natalie grapple with the consequences of their actions, a part of me took solace in the fact that justice, though harsh, had been served. They received the karmic retribution they deserved, a fitting end to their sordid tale. The weeks following the confrontation were a time of introspection and rebuilding for me. I watched as Ethan and Natalie's lives unraveled, their once bright futures dimmed by the shadow of their betrayal. One afternoon, I encountered Ethan in a coffee shop. He was alone, a far cry from the confident man he once was. "Lauren," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've lost everything. My job, my reputation. I never realized how much I'd lose." I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved now broken by his own doing. "You didn't just lose, Ethan. You chose. You chose this path when you decided to betray me." He looked down, the weight of his choices etched on his face. "I'm sorry, Lauren. Truly sorry. Your apologies can't undo the past, Ethan. You have to live with what you did, just like I do." Leaving Ethan in his solitude, I walked away, feeling a sense of closure. I had moved past the need for revenge. My healing wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. Natalie's fall from grace was equally stark. Ostracized and alone, she reached out to me one last time. "Lauren, I've lost my job, my friends. I have nothing. Please, can't we put this behind us?" I responded with the finality of someone who had crossed a bridge and burned it behind her. "What we had as sisters is behind us, Natalie. You made your choice, and now you live with it. I've moved on." I heard the defeat in her silence, a silence that spoke volumes. In the months that followed, I threw myself into my work and my personal growth. I discovered strengths I never knew I had, and weaknesses I was now brave enough to face. The betrayal had shattered me, but in its wake, I found the pieces of who I truly was. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that the experience, as painful as it was, had taught me invaluable lessons. About trust, about resilience, and about my own worth. As I looked to the future, I felt a sense of hope. I had risen from the ashes of my old life, stronger and more self-assured. The path ahead was mine to shape, and I stepped forward with confidence, ready for whatever came next.
I never expected my life to unravel over a post-it note. You know those small yellow squares people use for quick reminders? Yeah, one of those was about to turn my world upside down. My name is Jamie, and until last Tuesday, I thought I had it all figured out. Great career, loving husband, and the kind of life that made other people wonder how I managed to keep all the plates spinning. Spoiler alert, I didn't. I just returned from a 3-day business trip to Chicago, dragging my wheeled suitcase through our quiet house at 11 p.m. The lights were off, except for the dim glow of the kitchen under-cabinet lighting we always left on. That's when I saw it, a yellow square stuck to the refrigerator door. Need some time to think. Don't wait up. 8 words. That's all Ethan left me after 12 years together, 5 of them married. I stood there in my wrinkled blazer, still wearing my uncomfortable heels, staring at his handwriting until the letters started to blur. Ethan. I called out anyway, my voice echoing through our empty house. No response, of course. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. Hey, it's Ethan. Leave a message. Hey, just got home. Got your note. Call me when you can. I tried to keep my voice casual, like I wasn't standing in our dark kitchen at nearly midnight, talking to his voicemail while my stomach tied itself in knots. I kicked off my heels and walked through the house, flipping on lights as I went. Everything looked normal, almost too normal. His laptop was missing from his usual spot on the coffee table, but otherwise, there were no signs of. What? What was I even looking for? My phone buzzed, and I nearly dropped it in my rush to check the screen. But it was just a text from Helen, my mother-in-law. Hope you had a safe flight home, sweetheart. Lunch tomorrow. I stared at her message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Helen had been more of a mother to me than my own in the past few years. She'd know if something was wrong with Ethan, wouldn't she? Instead of replying, I walked upstairs to our bedroom. Ethan's side of the closet looked untouched, his suits hanging in their usual order. His dresser drawers were closed, his watch still on the nightstand. Everything seemed fine, except for the gnawing feeling in my gut that nothing was fine at all. I changed into one of his old t-shirts, a habit I'd picked up years ago, and sat on our bed, scrolling through my phone. No new messages from Ethan. No missed calls. Just that stupid yellow post-it note downstairs, mocking me with its vagueness. The last time I'd seen him was Sunday morning, before I left for my flight. We'd had coffee together, talked about his mother's upcoming doctor's appointment, made plans for the weekend. Everything had seemed normal. Hadn't it? But now that I thought about it, there had been something off in his smile when he kissed me goodbye. A hesitation in his hug that I'd brushed off as early morning sluggishness. The way he'd lingered in the doorway watching me load my suitcase into the Uber. My phone buzzed again, another text from Helen. Ethan mentioned he might be working late this week. Everything okay? I felt my chest tighten. Working late? Since when did Ethan work late? As an IT consultant, he usually kept regular hours, often working from home. Something wasn't adding up. I typed back quickly, just got home. Everything's fine. Lunch tomorrow sounds great. But as I lay there in our too-empty bed, staring at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above me, I knew I was lying. Nothing was fine. That little yellow post-it note was just the beginning, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew our life together was about to change forever. I just didn't know how much. The hospital corridor smelled like artificial lemons and broken promises. I'd come straight from work to visit Helen, still wearing my power suit like some kind of corporate armor. The text from the hospital had arrived during my morning meeting. Helen had been admitted after a bad fall. Jamie, sweetheart. Helen's face lit up as I entered her room, though I could see the pain behind her smile. She was propped up against stark white pillows, looking smaller than usual in the hospital bed. You didn't have to rush over. Of course I did. I leaned down to hug her, careful of the 4 in her arm. Have you heard from Ethan? I tried calling him. A flicker of something, confusion, concern, crossed Helen's face. He stopped by briefly this morning. Said he had some work emergency. She paused, studying my face. Is everything all right between you two? I busied myself arranging the flowers I'd brought, buying time to steady my voice. Why do you ask? Mother's intuition, maybe. Helen reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. He seems distracted lately. Not himself. He left me a note last night, I admitted, sinking into the visitor's chair. Said he needed time to think. Hasn't been home since. Helen's monitor beeped steadily in the background as she processed this. That doesn't sound like my son. No, I agreed. It doesn't. My phone buzzed, a text from Ethan, sorry about last night. Crazy work situation. Talk soon. I showed Helen the message. She frowned, her fingers tightening around mine. Jamie, there's something. The door opened, and a nurse walked in with Helen's medication. The moment shattered like glass, whatever Helen had been about to say lost in the routine of vital signs and pill cups. Mrs. Lark, how's your pain level? The nurse asked, checking Helen's chart. Oh, manageable, Helen said, but I saw her wince as she shifted position. Though I wouldn't say no to something stronger. While the nurse adjusted Helen's medication, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Greg. Hey, you guys free for dinner Friday? Megan's making her famous lasagna. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Greg and Megan had been our friends since college, but the thought of pretending everything was normal made my stomach churn. Who's that? Helen asked after the nurse left. Greg. Dinner invitation. Go, Helen insisted. You need to get out, not sit here watching me sleep. Besides. She paused, that same strange look crossing her face. Maybe Ethan will actually show up for that. Before I could respond, my phone rang, work calling. I stepped into the hallway to take it, watching through the window as Helen closed her eyes. Her face tight with pain that had nothing to do with her fall. When I returned, Helen was holding a small photo album I recognized from her bedside table at home. Look what Ethan brought this morning, she said, patting the bed beside her. Come see. I sat on the edge of her bed, and she opened the album. There we were, Ethan and me on our wedding day, both of us laughing at something off camera. I remembered that moment. Greg had tripped over his own feet trying to take the picture. You know what I see when I look at this? Helen asked softly. I see my son looking at you like you're his whole world. Helen. Let me finish. She turned the page. Another photo, this one from Christmas last year. Ethan and I in matching ugly sweaters, his arm around my waist. Something's wrong, isn't it? Something more than just a note. I stared at the photo, at our smiling faces, trying to pinpoint when things had started to change. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm going to find out. Helen closed the album, her hands trembling slightly. Jamie, there's something you should know about. Her monitor suddenly erupted in sharp beeps. Helen's face went pale, her hand clutching her chest. I lunged for the call button as she gasped for breath. Help! I shouted into the hallway. I need help in here. As medical staff rushed in, I was pushed aside, forced to watch helplessly as they worked on Helen. My phone buzzed again, another text from Ethan. But this one wasn't meant for me. Megan's lasagna sat untouched on my plate as I watched Ethan check his phone for the 1000th time that evening. We were at Greg and Megan's house for our usual Friday dinner, but nothing about this felt usual. Sorry, Ethan muttered, sliding his phone back into his pocket. Work stuff. On a Friday night? Greg raised an eyebrow. Man, they're working you too hard. I took a sip of wine, remembering the text I'd glimpsed on Ethan's phone at the hospital. The one that wasn't meant for me, miss you already. Can't wait until Friday. Jamie, how's Helen doing? Megan asked, refilling my glass without waiting for an answer. Her hand trembled slightly, spilling a few drops of red wine on the white tablecloth. Stable, I said, watching Megan dab at the stain with her napkin. The doctors say she can probably go home next week. That's great news. Greg smiled. We should all visit her this weekend. Ethan's phone buzzed again. He pushed back from the table. Sorry, I need to take this. As he walked onto the back porch, I noticed Megan's eyes following him. She quickly looked away when she caught me watching. So, Greg said, clearly trying to fill the awkward silence, anyone want dessert? Megan made tiramisu. I'll help you get it, Megan offered, practically jumping from her chair. Through the glass doors, I could see Ethan pacing, running his hand through his hair the way he did when he was stressed. His face was illuminated by his phone screen, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of his expression, not stressed, but smiling. Jamie? Greg's voice snapped me back. You okay? Yeah, just. I gestured vaguely at my barely touched lasagna. Not very hungry. In the kitchen, I heard a glass shatter, followed by Megan's muffled curse. Greg rushed to help her, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the view of my husband having what was clearly not a work call. My phone buzzed, a text from Helen, doctors say I can have visitors tomorrow. Will you come? Bring Ethan if you can find him. The sliding door opened, and Ethan returned, slipping his phone away with that same secret smile. Sorry about that. Where's dessert? Megan dropped something, I said, studying his face. Everything okay with work? Yeah, just a server issue. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Nothing major. Greg and Megan returned with the tiramisu, but Megan's eyes were red, and she'd changed her blouse. Everything okay in there? I asked. Fine. Megan's voice was too bright. Just clumsy me, breaking things. As Greg served dessert, I watched the way Megan's hands shook, the way Ethan kept checking his phone under the table. The way neither of them would look directly at anyone else. Actually, I said, standing up, I should probably go. Helen texted about visiting tomorrow, and I need to review some work documents tonight. I'll stay and help clean up, Ethan said quickly. Too quickly. No, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You should come home. We need to talk. The room went silent. Greg looked between us, confusion clear on his face. Megan suddenly became very interested in her dessert. Can it wait? Ethan asked. I promised Greg I'd help him with his new gaming setup. Did you? I turned to Greg. Did he promise that? Greg shifted uncomfortably. We hadn't really. Right. I grabbed my purse. Thanks for dinner, Megan. The lasagna was delicious. Jamie, wait, Ethan started. No. I cut him off. Either come home now, or don't come home at all. Your choice. I walked out before anyone could respond, but through the front window, I saw Megan grab Ethan's arm, shaking her head slightly. He pulled away, but didn't follow me. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, watching the house. The text from the hospital was still open on my phone, miss you already. Can't wait until Friday. Friday. Dinner at Greg and Megan's. My hands stopped shaking as a strange calm settled over me. Now I knew. Now I could plan. Helen had tried to warn me, I realized. Before her attack, she'd been about to tell me something. Something about her son, and possibly about the woman I'd thought was my friend. Well, they wanted to play games. Fine. Game on. Ethan didn't come home that night. Or the next. Our house felt like a museum of someone else's life, photos on walls, mixed up coffee mugs in the cabinet, his shoes still by the door. I spent Saturday morning in my home office, pretending to work while actually scrolling through months of phone records. The hospital called around noon. Jamie? Helen's voice was weak. Could you bring my gray cardigan from home? The one with the pearl buttons? Of course. I was already grabbing my keys. How are you feeling? Better now that I've seen Greg. There was a pause. He stopped by this morning. Alone. My hand froze on the doorknob. Greg came to see you. He seemed worried. Asked some strange questions about you and Ethan. I found Helen's cardigan in her bedroom closet, neatly hung next to other cardigans that all looked exactly the same to me. As I reached for it, something fell from the pocket, a small, leather-bound notebook. Jamie? Helen was still on the line. Are you there? Yeah, sorry. Just found your sweater. I picked up the notebook, recognizing Helen's careful handwriting. I'll be there soon. I hung up and opened the notebook. The first page was dated 3 months ago. Ethan came by today. Something's wrong, he's not himself. Mentioned trouble at work, but I know my son. This is different. When I asked about Jamie, he changed the subject. Megan dropped by later, asking about him. Said Greg was worried too. But the way she asked. My phone buzzed, a text from Greg, can we talk? Alone? I stared at the message, then back at Helen's notebook. The next entry was from 2 weeks ago. Saw them together at Carlton's cafe. They didn't see me. Ethan was holding her hand across the table. My heart breaks for Jamie. Should I tell her? Would she believe me? Another text from Greg, please. It's important. I texted back, coffee shop on 5th. 30 minutes. Greg was already there when I arrived, fidgeting with a paper napkin. He looked like he hadn't slept. I need to tell you something, he said as I sat down. About Megan. And Ethan. I know. He blinked. You do. Not everything. I placed Helen's notebook on the table. But enough. Greg stared at the notebook, then pushed his coffee aside. Last night, after you left. Megan confessed. They've been. He couldn't finish. How long? 6 months. His voice cracked. She says it's over, but the texts are still coming, I finished. The secret meetings. The lies. He nodded, looking destroyed. I found hotel receipts. Credit card statements. They were together when Helen had her attack. My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. What are you going to do? I don't know. Greg met my eyes. What are we going to do? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, back off. You don't want this fight. I showed it to Greg. His face hardened. That's Megan's work phone, he said. She thinks I don't know about it. Another text, some things are better left alone. For Helen's sake. My hands started shaking, not from fear, but rage. They were threatening Helen now. Greg, I said, my voice deadly calm, how good are you still with computers? Good enough. Why? I showed him the threatening texts. Because I think it's time we stop playing defense. He studied my face for a moment, then pulled out his laptop. What do you need? Everything. Bank records, emails, phone logs. Especially from their work accounts. I took Helen's notebook back, clutching it like a weapon. They want to play dirty. Let's show them what dirty really looks like. As Greg started typing, my phone buzzed one more time. A message from Helen. The doctors found something on my latest scan. We need to talk. Soon. I looked at Greg, then at the notebook, then at the threatening texts. Time was running out, and I had to choose: protect Helen, expose the truth, or take revenge. Maybe, with the right plan, I could do all three. The doctor's words hung in the air like smoke: stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Helen sat in her hospital bed, calm as ever. While I felt the room spin around me. How long have you known? I managed to ask. A few weeks. Helen reached for my hand. I didn't want to add to your troubles. My phone buzzed, another work email about the upcoming Thanksgiving conference in New York. I was supposed to give the keynote speech, a career-defining moment. The timing couldn't have been worse. Does Ethan know? Helen's silence was answer enough. She hadn't told him, and he hadn't been around to notice. I'll cancel my trip, I said. The conference can find another speaker. Absolutely not. Helen's grip tightened. I won't have you sacrificing your career. Ethan can take care of me. I almost laughed at that. Ethan, who hadn't been home in days. Ethan, who was too busy with Megan to visit his own mother in the hospital. My phone buzzed again. Greg this time found something in their emails. You need to see this. Jamie? Helen's voice pulled me back. There's something else you should know. Before she could continue, Ethan walked in. He looked surprised to see me, like he'd been hoping to avoid exactly this scenario. Mom, he said, barely glancing my way. How are you feeling? Like I have cancer, Helen replied dryly. But you'd know that if you'd been here when the doctors explained everything. Ethan flinched. I've been busy with work? I finished for him. Strange, since Greg mentioned your company's been on holiday schedule this week. The tension in the room could have powered a small city. Ethan's phone chimed, that familiar sound that made my stomach turn. You should get that, I said. Might be important. Helen watched this exchange with knowing eyes. Ethan, why don't you get me some water? Once he left, Helen pulled something from under her pillow, an envelope. I wrote this weeks ago, when I first suspected. Everything. Don't open it yet. Wait until after Thanksgiving. Helen. Promise me. Her voice was steel. And promise you'll go to that conference. I have my reasons. My phone lit up with Greg's messages. Email trail shows hotel bookings. Financial transfers. They're planning something over Thanksgiving. Ethan returned with the water, and his phone chimed again. This time, I caught a glimpse of the screen. Everything's arranged for next week. Once she's in New York. The pieces clicked together like a terrible puzzle. They were waiting for me to leave town. Planning something while I was gone. I should go, I said, standing. Need to prepare for the conference. You're still going? Ethan asked too quickly. Of course. I smiled, channeling every business negotiation I'd ever conducted. It's important for my career. You'll take care of Helen, right? He nodded, relief visible on his face. Of course. I hugged Helen goodbye, feeling the envelope crinkle between us. I'll see you after Thanksgiving. In the hallway, I texted Greg, need a favor. How good are you at accessing security cameras? His response was immediate, already on it. What's the plan? I looked back through the hospital room window. Helen was showing Ethan her notebook, the decoy one I'd planted earlier, not the real one in my purse. Ethan was falling for it, just like he'd fall for my apparent departure for New York. They think I'm leaving town, I wrote to Greg. Let's give them exactly what they want. Another text from Megan's burner phone arrived. Smart choice about the conference. Some distances are better kept. I clutched Helen's envelope, my decision crystallizing. They thought they were setting a trap, but they just walked into mine. One more thing, I texted Greg. Book me a hotel room in New York. Make sure everyone knows about it. Let them think they had me figured out. Let them think I was running away. Thanksgiving was going to be interesting this year. The security footage from our house played on Greg's laptop, showing Ethan and Megan entering at 2 a.m. I watched from my rental car parked across the street, where I'd been since supposedly leaving for New York yesterday. "They're in your bedroom," Greg's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Want me to kill the feed?" "No." My voice sounded strange, even to me. "Keep recording." My phone lit up with a text from Helen's nurse. "Mrs. Lark asking for you. Says it's urgent." I gripped the steering wheel harder, torn between two betrayals unfolding simultaneously. The one in my bedroom and the one at the hospital, where Ethan hadn't visited Helen once since I'd left. "Jamie," Greg warned, "they're accessing your home office computer." Of course they were. The fake financial documents I'd left there would keep them busy. What they didn't know was that every keystroke was being logged, every file access recorded. Another text from Helen's nurse. "Doctor says her condition is deteriorating rapidly." "Greg," I said, "send me the hospital's security feed." The split screen on my phone showed two scenes, my bedroom and Helen's hospital room. My husband and his lover rifling through my personal files while my mother-in-law lay alone, fighting for her life. Helen's envelope sat heavy in my jacket pocket, still unopened. "Wait until after Thanksgiving," she'd said. But watching her now, alone in that hospital bed, I couldn't wait any longer. My hands shook as I opened it. "My dearest Jamie. By now you know about Ethan and Megan. What you don't know is why I've been protecting them. The cancer isn't new, I've known for months. Ethan discovered something in the insurance paperwork. Something that could ruin everything. Your company's health insurance, which covers me as a dependent, has a clause about pre-existing conditions. If they discover I knew about the cancer before the policy took effect." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Helen had kept quiet about her diagnosis to protect my career, while Ethan and Megan had been using this information to. "Movement in your office," Greg interrupted. "They're accessing your work emails." On the hospital feed, Helen's monitors started beeping erratically. Medical staff rushed into her room. "Jamie," Greg's voice was urgent, "they're sending emails from your account. Something about insurance fraud." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. They weren't just having an affair, they were setting me up. Using Helen's condition to manufacture a fraud case against me. Once I was discredited and fired, Helen would lose her insurance coverage. My phone rang, the hospital's number. "Mrs. Lark is asking for you," the nurse said. "She's very agitated. The doctor says." In my bedroom, Ethan and Megan were celebrating, champagne in hand. My champagne. My bed. My life. "The doctor says she may not make it through the night." I started the car, then stopped. If I went to the hospital, I'd lose the evidence I needed to stop them. If I stayed, I might lose Helen. "Greg," I said, "send everything to my lawyer." "Everything. Already done." "But Jamie, there's something else." Something in their emails about Helen's original diagnosis. The hospital feed showed Helen reaching for her phone, her hands shaking. My phone buzzed with her message. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have told you sooner. The insurance. It wasn't just about me. Check the dates on Ethan's first email to Megan. The day I got my diagnosis. The day your company announced your promotion. The day everything started falling apart." In my bedroom, Ethan raised his glass in a mock toast, unaware he was being recorded. unaware that his mother was dying. Unaware that his carefully constructed plan was about to backfire. But as I sat there, watching both screens, I realized I couldn't win this one. Not completely. Whatever I chose, justice or mercy, revenge or protection, I would lose something precious. Helen's monitor flatlined. And I made my choice. I walked into my house exactly 36 minutes after Helen's heart stopped. The champagne bottle still sat empty on my bedroom floor, but Ethan and Megan had moved to the kitchen. I could hear their laughter floating up the stairs as I silently made my way to my office. My laptop was still open, emails drafted and ready to send that would destroy my career. Evidence of insurance fraud carefully constructed to look like I'd known about Helen's condition all along. Their perfect plan. I pressed send on my own email, the one containing every recorded minute of their betrayal, copied to the board of directors, HR, and Greg's lawyer. Then I walked downstairs. "You're supposed to be in New York," Ethan said, freezing with a wine glass halfway to his lips. Megan dropped her phone, face draining of color. "Helen's dead." My voice didn't shake. She died alone because her son was too busy trying to destroy his wife to visit his dying mother. Ethan's face went through a series of emotions, shock, grief, guilt, before settling on something harder. "Jamie, whatever you think you know. I know everything." I pulled out my phone, playing the security footage of them in my office. Every email. Every meeting. Every plan to use Helen's illness to frame me for fraud. Megan stepped forward, hands raised. "We can explain." "Can you explain this?" I played Helen's final voice message, the one she'd recorded just before her heart gave out. Her voice filled the kitchen. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I told them everything. About the original diagnosis, about your plan with Megan. About the real insurance fraud, the one you committed 3 years ago." Ethan lunged for my phone, but I was ready. I stepped back, watching his face contort as his mother's confession continued. "You used my illness twice," Helen's voice accused. "Once to embezzle from your company, hiding the transactions under my medical bills. And now to frame Jamie when she got too close to discovering it." "Turn it off," Ethan growled. "Why?" "Afraid to hear how your mother spent her final hours making sure the truth came out." Megan grabbed her purse, heading for the door, but Greg was already there. He'd been waiting outside, and now he blocked the only exit. "Going somewhere?" he asked his wife. "The board has everything," I said, watching Ethan's face as it all crumbled around him. "The real fraud evidence. The affair. Helen's statement. They're probably reading it right now." Ethan's phone started ringing. Then Megan's. Then mine. "You don't understand," Ethan pleaded, suddenly desperate. "I did it for Mom. The insurance wouldn't cover her experimental treatments. So you stole the money," I finished. "I would have helped you, Ethan. We could have found another way." "And then what?" he spat. "Watch you play the hero while I remained the failing son. Watch my dying mother love you more than me." His words hung in the air, revealing the real betrayal, not just of our marriage, but of himself. My phone buzzed again, the hospital, asking about Helen's arrangements. In the end, she'd chosen me as her medical proxy, not Ethan. Her final act of trust. "The police will be here soon," Greg said quietly. "The board's filing charges." Megan started crying, but Ethan just stood there, staring at the phone still playing his mother's voice. His final message from her, and it was a testimony against him. "I could have forgiven the affair," I said, turning to leave. "But using your mother's death as a weapon? That's something Helen never forgave you for, and neither will I." "Jamie, wait," Ethan called out, but I was already walking away. Outside, the November air was sharp with coming snow. My phone showed dozens of missed calls, the board, the police, the hospital. The next few hours would be chaos. But as I got in my car, I noticed one last unread message from Helen, sent moments before she died. Remember? Sweetheart, sometimes the best revenge is living well. I started the engine, leaving Ethan and Megan to face the consequences of their choices. Helen had taught me that justice and revenge aren't always the same thing. Sometimes they're better. 6 months after Helen's funeral, I stood in her garden, surrounded by the spring flowers she'd planted last fall. Her final gift, blooming in defiance of everything that had happened. The house sale was closing today. Ethan wouldn't be there, he couldn't be, given the conditions of his plea deal. The embezzlement charges had stuck, even if Megan had managed to avoid prosecution by turning state's evidence. Last box, Greg said, carrying a carefully wrapped photo album to my car. He'd been my rock through all of this, even as he navigated his own divorce from Megan. Found something you should see, he added, pulling an envelope from his pocket. It was hidden behind Helen's bedroom mirror. The envelope was dated 3 days before her death, addressed to me in her elegant handwriting. Inside was a key and a letter. My dearest Jamie. By the time you read this, you'll know everything. About Ethan's betrayal, about Megan, about the money. But there's one last thing you don't know, something I've kept hidden for 30 years. The key opens a safety deposit box at First National. What you find there might help you understand why I wasn't surprised by Ethan's actions. Some patterns repeat across generations, but you've shown me they can also be broken. You were the daughter I always wanted. Remember that. Love, Helen. My phone buzzed, a text from my lawyer. Ethan signed the divorce papers. It's done. I looked at the key in my hand, then at the blooming garden. Helen had known, not just about Ethan's recent betrayals, but about something deeper, older. Something she'd kept hidden until she was sure I was strong enough to handle it. Want company? Greg asked, noticing my expression. I shook my head. This one I need to do alone. The bank was quiet when I arrived. The safety deposit box contained a single manila envelope, thick with documents. On top was another note from Helen. The truth about Ethan's father, and why I never told anyone how he really died. My hands shook as I read the decades-old police reports, newspaper clippings, and Helen's private journals. The pattern she'd mentioned became clear, a history of financial fraud, betrayal, and secrets that had shaped both mother and son. But Helen had broken the cycle. She'd chosen truth over protection in the end, chosen justice over family loyalty. Chosen me. My phone buzzed again, work this time. The promotion I'd been worried about losing had turned into a CEO position at a competing firm. Life had a way of surprising you. As I drove home, I passed the street where Megan now lived alone, where Greg was rebuilding his life, where Ethan had lost everything. The revenge I'd wanted had come naturally, without me having to orchestrate it. Helen had taught me that too, sometimes justice works best when you step back and let truth do its work. At home, I found one last surprise, a small package from Helen's lawyer. Inside was a set of garden tools and seeds, with a final note. For your new beginning. Some gardens grow better after a fire. I stood in my backyard, holding the seeds Helen had chosen for me months ago, planning for a future she wouldn't see but had helped create. The spring air was thick with possibility. My phone lit up with another text, an unknown number. For a moment, I tensed, remembering those threatening messages from months ago. But this was different. Thank you for the flowers on Mom's grave. You were a better child to her than I ever was. I didn't respond. Some conversations were better left in the past. Instead, I knelt in the soft earth and began to plant Helen's seeds, understanding finally what she'd meant about patterns and choices. About revenge and grace. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you. Sometimes it's about growing something new in the ashes of what was lost. I dug my hands into the soil and began my new chapter, Helen's last lesson blooming around me like a garden after rain.
In the quiet of our suburban home, the words hit me like a bolt from the blue. Isn't the baby adorable? Looks just like you. My heart skipped a beat as I stood frozen, a glass of water halfway to my lips. The voices came from the living room where my husband, Daniel, was on a video call. Curiosity mingled with a creeping unease. I tiptoed closer, peering around the corner. Daniel, usually so mundane in his conversations, had a strange look on his face. He quickly minimized the video call as I entered the room. "Hey, Claire. You're home early," he said, a little too casually. "Yeah, the traffic was light. Who were you talking to?" "Just some colleagues," he replied, avoiding eye contact. The moment lingered awkwardly before I shrugged it off and headed to the kitchen. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My sister Emily's face flashed in my mind, but I quickly dismissed the thought. She'd been out of touch lately, busy with her own life, or so she said. Later that evening, as I lay in bed, the shadows of doubt crept in. Daniel and I had been drifting apart, our conversations dwindling to mundane pleasantries. Was it just the wariness of our 5-year marriage or something more? The next day at work, I couldn't focus. My role as a marketing executive, which I usually loved, felt dull and unimportant. My mind kept drifting back to that overheard conversation. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces didn't fit. Emily, with her vibrant personality and stunning looks, had always been the center of attention. I, on the other hand, had found solace in my career, away from the shadows of comparison. I decided to call Emily. The phone rang, but no answer. I sent a text, but it remained unanswered. This wasn't like her. Emily was many things, but silent wasn't one of them. That night I confronted Daniel. "Is there something going on between you and Emily?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What? No, of course not," he replied a little too quickly. His denial did little to quell the storm brewing inside me. The following week, I received an invitation from Emily to meet for coffee. She sounded upbeat, but there was a nervous undertone in her voice that I couldn't place. My mind raced with possibilities as I prepared for what was to come. At the cafe, Emily's smile didn't reach her eyes. She fidgeted with her coffee cup before blurting out, "Claire, I'm pregnant." The news hit me like a wave. Pregnant? My sister, who always said she wasn't ready for such commitments? But the shock was replaced by a nauseating realization. The words I had overheard came rushing back. "Looks just like you." I struggled to maintain my composure. That's great news, Em. Who's the father?" Emily hesitated, her eyes darting away. "It's complicated." My heart sank. The unspoken truth hung heavily between us. I had to know. "Is it Daniel?" Emily's silence was all the confirmation I needed. A sick feeling settled in my stomach as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the whispers in the corner. It all made sense now. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "How could you?" My voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. "Claire, I'm sorry, I never meant for this to happen." Emily stammered. I didn't wait for her to finish. I walked out of the cafe, my mind racing. This betrayal was a wound too deep, a cut too sharp. I needed to act, to make them feel the weight of their deceit. As I drove home, a plan began to form. Daniel and Emily, they would pay for what they'd done. Revenge, cold and calculated, was the only path forward. I wouldn't let them get away with shattering my world. They would learn the hard way that betrayal comes with a price. The days following the cafe were a blur of anger and disbelief. I moved through them like a ghost, my mind obsessively replaying Emily's confession and Daniel's betrayal. Work became my only refuge, a place where I could bury my emotions in deadlines and presentations. At home, I watched Daniel with a new lens, seeing him not as my husband, but as a stranger. His every gesture, every word, felt like a mockery of our marriage. I needed time to plan my next move, so I kept my knowledge of his affair hidden, wearing a mask of normalcy. One evening, as we sat at dinner, a meal I had prepared with feigned normality, I decided to probe further. "So, how's work been? Any interesting projects?" I asked, my voice steady. "It's been the usual. Nothing much. Just busy with meetings and deadlines," Daniel replied, his eyes on his plate. "I see. And how's Emily? We haven't seen her in a while," I ventured, watching his reaction closely. He paused, a flicker of something crossing his face. "Emily? I don't know. We don't really talk much." I nodded, a cold rage building inside me. The lies were as effortless to him as breathing. As the days passed, I began to gather evidence. I quietly accessed Daniel's phone, uncovering a trail of messages and calls to Emily that confirmed my worst fears. Their deceit was not just a fleeting mistake, but a calculated betrayal. One night, lying in bed next to Daniel, the injustice of it all hit me. Here I was, a successful professional, a loyal wife, reduced to playing detective in my own marriage. Daniel's steady breathing next to me felt like an insult. "I can't believe you," I whispered into the darkness, my words a vow of retribution. The following week was a strategic play of gathering evidence and planning my revenge. I contacted a lawyer, discreetly setting the wheels in motion for a divorce that would leave Daniel with nothing. I also started documenting every financial transaction, preparing for the inevitable legal battle. But it wasn't just about the legalities. I wanted them to feel the burn of their actions, to suffer as I had. I began to spread hints of Emily's affair within our social circle, carefully crafting a narrative that would tarnish her reputation. I watched as the rumors took hold, seeing her once-admired image start to crumble. Meanwhile, I played the part of the dutiful wife to Daniel, all while setting the stage for his downfall. My plan was meticulous, a slow poison that would leave him reeling. The final piece came when I discovered Emily was planning a baby shower. The perfect opportunity to expose them, to reveal their sordid affair to everyone they knew. As I prepared for the day, a cold determination settled over me. This was the moment of reckoning. They would pay for their betrayal, and I would be the architect of their downfall. The baby shower was set in a quaint local hall, decorated with pastel balloons and a banner that read, "Welcome, little one." I arrived early, my heart a battlefield of anger and anticipation. As guests trickled in, I mingled, my smile a practiced mask hiding my true intentions. Emily was radiant, unaware of the storm brewing. She moved through the crowd, the picture of blissful ignorance. My resentment towards her deepened with each congratulatory hug she received. Then, as the room filled with chatter and laughter, I found the moment I had been waiting for. I clinked my glass, signaling for attention. The room quieted down, all eyes on me. "I'd like to say a few words," I began, my voice steady. "Emily, you look absolutely beautiful today. Motherhood suits you." Emily beamed. "Thank you, Claire. That means a lot coming from you." I paused for a moment, letting the tension build. "I also think it's important for us to acknowledge the father of the child on this special day." I turned towards her, my gaze unwavering. After all, a baby is a celebration of both parents, right? The room fell into an uneasy silence. Emily's smile faltered, her eyes searching mine for an explanation. "It's just so wonderful that Emily has found happiness," I continued, my voice laced with venom, "even if that happiness is built on betrayal and deceit." Whispers erupted around the room. Emily's face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock. "What are you saying, Claire?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm saying that the father of your child is none other than my husband, Daniel," I declared, the words slicing through the room like a knife. Gasps and murmurs filled the air. Emily looked around frantically, as if seeking an escape. This isn't true. Claire, why would you say something like that?" she managed to say, her voice trembling. "Oh, but it is true, dear sister," I said coldly. "I have all the evidence. Text messages, emails, late-night calls. You two didn't do a very good job of covering your tracks." Emily's facade crumbled, her eyes brimming with tears. "Claire, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake." "A mistake," I laughed bitterly. "Destroying a marriage is not a mistake, Emily. It's a choice you both made." The room was thick with tension, the festive atmosphere now a distant memory. I looked around at the stunned faces, my message delivered loud and clear. "I hope you both find happiness in the ruins you've created," I said, turning to leave the shattered celebration behind. As I walked out, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, and with it, the first step of my revenge was complete. Emily and Daniel's betrayal was now exposed for all to see, their perfect images shattered by their own selfish actions. The aftermath of the baby shower was like a wildfire, the scandal spreading through our social circles with ferocious speed. Emily's reputation, once pristine, was now tarnished with whispers of infidelity and deceit. As for Daniel, he returned home to find his belongings neatly packed in the living room, a clear message that his presence was no longer welcome in my life. "Claire, we need to talk about this." Daniel pleaded, his voice a mix of desperation and disbelief. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice icy. "Your things are packed. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay." "Please, let me explain," he implored, stepping towards me. I held up my hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Save it, Daniel. I know everything. I've seen the messages, the emails. You betrayed me, with my own sister no less. There's no coming back from that." "But I love you, Claire. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake," he stammered. "Love?" I scoffed. "Your actions speak louder than your words, Daniel. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." He looked at me, his eyes searching for a sign of forgiveness, but there was none to be found. "Where will I go?" he asked, his voice breaking. "That's not my concern. You should have thought about that before you destroyed our marriage," I replied, unmoved. As he left, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The first part of my plan was complete. Daniel was out of my life, but my revenge was far from over. The next phase was to ensure that Emily faced the full extent of her actions. I contacted a few friends in the media, providing them with enough information to fuel the scandal. The story of the affair between a respected marketing executive's husband and her sister made for sensational news. Emily's name was now synonymous with betrayal. I watched as Emily's social media accounts were flooded with hateful comments. Her once cheerful posts were now met with scorn and disdain. She called me several times, but I never answered. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. The final blow came when I learned that Emily had been let go from her job. The scandal had reached her workplace, and they wanted nothing to do with the drama. She was now not only a pariah in our social circles, but also struggling financially. As I sat in my quiet, empty house, I reflected on the chaos I had created. My heart was still heavy with the pain of betrayal, but there was also a sense of empowerment. I had taken control of the situation, and in doing so, I had made them pay for their deceit. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from my revelation continued to unfold. Daniel's attempts to contact me became more desperate, but I ignored each call and message. He was no longer a part of my life, a chapter painfully closed. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Reluctantly, I answered, only to hear Emily's voice on the other end. "Claire, please, we need to talk." I hesitated for a moment before responding coldly. "What is there left to say, Emily? I know I've made a horrible mistake. I've lost everything, Claire. My job, my friends. I'm begging you, please forgive me," she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. "Forgive you?" I replied, my tone sharp. "You betrayed me in the worst possible way. You and Daniel. There's no forgiveness for what you've done." "But I'm your sister," she sobbed. "Family is supposed to stick together." "Family doesn't do what you did," I retorted. "You made your choice, Emily. Now you have to live with the consequences, just like I do." I ended the call, cutting off her pleas. The satisfaction of seeing them suffer for their actions was cold comfort compared to the void their betrayal had left in my heart. A few days later, I received a letter from Daniel's lawyer. He was filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I laughed bitterly at the irony. He had the audacity to file for divorce after everything he had done. I called my lawyer, instructing him to proceed with the divorce and ensure that Daniel wouldn't get a cent more than legally required. The divorce proceedings were swift. Daniel tried to argue for a more favorable settlement, but the evidence of his infidelity weakened his position. The court ruled in my favor, leaving him with little. In the end, Emily and Daniel were both left to face the harsh reality of their actions. Emily had become a social outcast, struggling to rebuild her life, while Daniel faced financial ruin and the loss of the life we had built together. As I signed the final divorce papers, I felt a sense of closure. I had lost a husband and a sister, but I had regained my dignity and self-respect. They had tried to break me, but I had emerged stronger. I walked out of the lawyer's office into the bright light of a new beginning. The pain of the past was still there, but it was now a part of who I was, a reminder of my strength and resilience. In the months following the divorce, I found myself in a period of introspection. The home that once echoed with laughter and shared dreams now stood silent, a constant reminder of the betrayal. Yet, amidst the solitude, I discovered a newfound strength. I immersed myself in my work, channeling my energies into creative projects and corporate strategies. My colleagues noticed the change, often commenting on my unwavering focus and innovative ideas. My professional success, however, couldn't fill the void left by the absence of a family I once cherished. One evening, as I scrolled through my social media, I stumbled upon a post from an old friend featuring Emily. The image was a stark contrast to the glamorous, confident sister I once knew. The smile was there, but the sparkle in her eyes had dimmed. Beside her stood a small boy, his features a painful reminder of the past. Despite the bitterness, a part of me ached at the sight of my nephew, an innocent caught in the crossfire of our family drama. The next update was about Daniel. A mutual acquaintance had shared a post about a local charity event, and there he was, unmistakably thinner, his face wearing the signs of stress and hardship. I heard through the grapevine that he had taken a job at a small firm, a far cry from the prestigious position he held during our marriage. The man in the photo bore little resemblance to the confident, charismatic person I had fallen in love with. The realization hit me then. My revenge, though justified, had left a trail of destruction. In seeking justice for their betrayal, I had altered the course of not just my life, but theirs as well. Emily and Daniel, once integral parts of my life, were now mere shadows, lost and broken by the consequences of their actions. That night, as I lay in bed, a sense of melancholy washed over me. I had won the battle, but at what cost? The satisfaction of retribution was fleeting, overshadowed by the realization that the ties that once bound us were irreparably severed. I wondered if revenge was truly worth the price we all had paid. The weeks turned into months, and slowly the sharp edges of betrayal began to soften. I learned to find joy in the small things, a successful campaign at work, a weekend retreat with friends, the quiet moments of solitude that allowed me to reconnect with myself. In the end, the journey through betrayal and revenge taught me a valuable lesson about the complexities of human relationships and the resilience of the human spirit. I emerged from the ordeal not as a victim, but as a survivor, forged by the fires of adversity into a stronger, more self-assured individual. The moment George sneered those venomous words, "Then never come back, sign the divorce papers and leave," I knew my life was about to change forever. I stood in the opulent living room of the house we shared, a place that never truly felt like home. The walls, once symbols of security, now seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with memories of a marriage that had been nothing but a charade. Reflecting on the years spent with George, I realized how he had skillfully donned a mask of perfection in public, while in private, he was a tyrant. The duality of his character was so profound that it left me questioning my own sanity. George, the charming and successful trader, admired by all, was a facade. The real George was a man who relished in belittling me, his wife, behind closed doors. Our relationship hadn't always been this way. In college, George was the epitome of kindness, his patience seemingly boundless. He wooed me with his gentle demeanor, and before I knew it, I was entranced, agreeing to marry him. It was only after the vows were exchanged that his true nature surfaced, like a predator revealing itself. I became his prey, trapped in a web of emotional abuse and manipulation. Each day was a battle, a struggle to appease a man who seemed impossible to please. His words were like daggers, each one striking deeper than the last. "Hey, what's with that bland food?" he would bark. My apologies and attempts at explanation were met with scorn. "No excuses," he'd snap back. My spirit withered under his constant criticism. I longed to reach out, to share my pain with friends, but George, ever the controller, severed those ties too. He convinced them I was the problem, turning my cries for help into whispers lost in the wind. I once dared to ask George to let me visit my mother's grave. His response was a cold, heartless refusal, stripping away the last shred of humanity I thought he possessed. "Why would you show your face to someone who's already gone?" he scoffed, his eyes not leaving the financial newspaper he was reading. The realization that I was nothing more than an object to him was my breaking point. I demanded a divorce, a plea I thought he would dismiss. Instead, he flung the divorce papers at me with a malicious glee. "Sign these and leave," he commanded. In that moment, I felt a surge of freedom. I signed the papers without a second thought, severing the chains that bound me to George. The divorce was finalized with a swift brutality that mirrored our entire relationship. Leaving the house that had been my prison, I embarked on a journey back to my mother's home, the only place I hoped to find some solace. Little did I know that this decision would lead me to a reunion that would change my life even more dramatically. The dilapidated state of my mother's house was a stark contrast to the life of luxury I had just left. Standing before it, memories of a happier time flooded back. But the nostalgia was interrupted by a sudden thud behind me. Turning around, I saw an elderly man in a gray suit, a face from the past yet unfamiliar. "Are you alive?" he exclaimed, rushing towards me with an urgency that left me baffled. Before I could react, he embraced me, his tears soaking my shoulder. "I heard the news of your death. I couldn't sit still. I finally found you," he sobbed, his voice laden with a lifetime of regret and longing. His embrace, though unexpected, carried the warmth and familiarity of a long-lost connection. "Could it be, Dad?" I whispered, a mixture of hope and disbelief in my voice. He pulled back, his tear-streaked face searching mine for recognition. "Elizabeth? Are you Elizabeth?" he asked, his voice trembling. In that embrace, I felt the echoes of my childhood, the faint memories of a father's love that had been absent for so long. His name was Matthew, my father, who had vanished from my life when I was just a child. As we reconnected, the pieces of my past began to fall into place. Matthew's story unfolded, revealing a man torn away from his family by circumstances beyond his control. He spoke of a love for my mother that never waned, a love that was cut short by forces that pulled him away, leaving a void in both our lives. Sitting in the dusty living room of my childhood home, I shared with him the agonizing years I spent with George. My father listened, his expression a mix of sorrow and simmering anger. "I should have been there for you," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. As I recounted the cruelty and manipulation I endured, Matthew's demeanor shifted from sorrow to resolve. "We can't let him get away with this," he declared, his eyes now reflecting a determination that mirrored my own. It was then that we decided to take action, to seek justice and retribution for the years of suffering I endured at the hands of George. Our plan was simple yet bold. We would gather evidence of George's abuse, both physical and emotional, and expose him for the monster he was. Matthew, with his newfound resolve, was ready to stand by my side, to fight the battle that we both knew was long overdue. As the sun set on my first day back in my childhood home, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for far too long. With my father by my side, I was ready to face my past and reclaim my future. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. George would no longer control my life. It was time for retribution, and I was ready to fight. The morning sun cast a new light on the old house, bringing with it a sense of hope and determination. As Matthew and I sat at the kitchen table, laden with years of dust and memories, we began to devise our plan of action. Matthew was not just a forgotten father trying to make amends. He had resources and connections that could prove invaluable. "Elizabeth, we need evidence. Solid, indisputable evidence of George's abuse," Matthew said, his voice firm, yet tinged with a father's concern. I nodded, feeling a surge of empowerment. For years, I had documented George's abuse in secret, a diary of my pain hidden in the depths of my personal belongings. Now it was time to bring it into the light. As I shared my diary entries with Matthew, his face darkened with each word. The extent of my suffering, laid bare in those pages, fueled a fire within him. "We'll need more than this," he stated resolutely. "Do you have anything else? Any recordings or messages?" "Yes," I replied, a sense of relief washing over me. I had recorded some of George's tirades, his venomous words captured in the secrecy of my pocket. It was a risky move, but one driven by a desperate need for validation, for proof that I was not the one at fault. Matthew listened to the recordings, his expression a mix of pain and anger. "This is good, Elizabeth. This is what we need to bring him down," he said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a storm of emotions. Our conversation turned to George's professional life, a facade of success and respectability. "He's involved in some shady dealings at his company," I revealed. "I've overheard conversations, seen documents. He's embezzling funds." Matthew's eyes narrowed. "We can use this. It's time George faces the consequences of his actions, both personal and professional." The resolve in his voice was unwavering, a stark contrast to the man who had once left us behind. The next step in our plan required reaching out to an unexpected ally, my ex-father-in-law, Mr. Patterson. I hesitated, the thought of involving George's parents in our plan weighing heavily on me. They had always been kind, and I feared dragging them into this sordid affair. "Elizabeth, we need all the help we can get," Matthew urged. "If they know the truth, they might support us." Gathering my courage, I called Mr. Patterson, inviting him over under the guise of catching up. When he arrived, the surprise on his face was evident. "Elizabeth, it's been so long. You look different," he said, a hint of concern in his voice. "Mr. Patterson, there's something you need to know about George," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I recounted the years of abuse, the emotional scars that still lingered. Mr. Patterson listened, his expression shifting from shock to anger. "I had no idea. How could George do this?" he exclaimed, his voice shaking with emotion. "And the embezzlement. This is unacceptable. We need to act." With Mr. Patterson on our side, our plan gained momentum. We pooled our resources, gathering more evidence against George. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, painting a picture of a man who had deceived everyone around him. As we sat together, plotting our next move, I felt a sense of camaraderie, a bond formed through shared adversity. Together we were stronger, united in our quest for justice. The stage was set for a confrontation that would bring George's reign of terror to an end. The time for retribution was at hand, and we were ready to strike. The day of reckoning arrived. We had arranged to meet George at a neutral location, a quiet cafe where there would be witnesses to prevent any outburst from him. Mr. Patterson, Matthew, and I sat at a corner table, awaiting George's arrival with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. George walked in, his arrogance filling the room. Spotting us, he approached with a sneer. "What is this? An intervention?" he mocked, his voice dripping with disdain. "Sit down, George. We need to talk," Mr. Patterson said, his voice stern, devoid of the warmth he once showed his son. George's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Talk about what? Elizabeth, if this is about more money, you can forget it." "It's not about money, George," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It's about your actions, the abuse and the theft." George laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "Abuse, Elizabeth, you always were dramatic, and theft, you're delusional." I held his gaze, my resolve unwavering. "No, George, I'm not delusional. We have proof." I slid the folder containing the diary entries and recordings across the table. His face paled as he glanced through the documents, his facade beginning to crack. "This is nonsense," he spat, but his voice lacked conviction. Matthew leaned forward, his eyes hard. "We also know about the embezzlement, George. You've been stealing from your company." George's composure shattered. "You can't prove anything?" he hissed. Mr. Patterson interjected. "We can and we will. I can't believe I raised a son who could do such things." The confrontation escalated, with George alternating between denial and bluster. But the evidence was irrefutable. His mask of respectability had slipped, revealing the monster beneath. As we left the cafe, George's parting words were a venomous threat. "You'll regret this," he snarled. But we walked away, united and stronger for having faced him. The path to justice was clear, and George's reign of terror was coming to an end. The aftermath of the confrontation was a whirlwind of activity. With the evidence in hand, we approached George's company with the allegations of embezzlement. The company acted swiftly, launching an internal investigation that corroborated our claims. George was fired, his career in ruins. Simultaneously, I pursued legal action for alimony and damages for the years of abuse. The court proceedings were grueling, but I stood my ground, bolstered by the support of Matthew and Mr. Patterson. The diary and recordings played a crucial role, painting a vivid picture of the life I had endured with George. In the end, justice was served. The court ruled in my favor, granting a substantial settlement that would secure my financial independence. George, now a pariah, faced not only the loss of his career, but also the scorn of those he had deceived. The victory was bittersweet. While I had won my freedom and vindication, the years lost to George's abuse could never be reclaimed. Yet there was a sense of closure, a feeling that a chapter of my life had been conclusively closed. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my focus to rebuilding my life. Matthew and I, now reconciled, decided to renovate my mother's house, transforming it into a home filled with love and memories, free from the shadows of the past. The journey had been long and fraught with pain, but I emerged stronger with a newfound sense of self and purpose. The scars of the past would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. I was ready to start anew, to live a life of my own choosing, unencumbered by the specter of George. The future was mine to shape, and I embraced it with open arms and a hopeful heart. In the tranquil setting of the renovated house, now a haven of peace and new beginnings, I sat with Matthew on the porch, reflecting on our journey. The evening air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, a testament to the new life we had cultivated. "Elizabeth, do you ever regret it? Confronting George, exposing him?" Matthew asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. I paused, considering his question. "No, Dad, I don't regret it. It was difficult, but it needed to be done. For too long I let him control my life, my happiness." "No more," I replied, my voice firm, echoing the resolve I felt inside. Matthew nodded, a look of pride crossing his face. "You're strong, Elizabeth, stronger than you ever realized." The conversation shifted to our future plans. I expressed a desire to use my experience to help others who might be suffering in silence. "I want to be a voice for those who feel voiceless, to help them find the strength to seek help," I said, my determination clear. Matthew supported my ambition, offering to help in any way he could. "Let's do it together, Elizabeth. Let's make a difference." Our plans were interrupted by an unexpected visitor, Mr. Patterson. He arrived with a somber expression, requesting a private word with me. We stepped aside, and he shared news that sent a chill down my spine. "Elizabeth, it's about George," he began, his voice heavy. "He's spiraling out of control. After losing his job and reputation, he's been seen wandering the streets, shouting your name, blaming you for his downfall." A mix of emotions surged within me, fear, pity, and a lingering anger. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Patterson, but he brought this upon himself. His actions, his choices led him here," I responded, my heart heavy but my resolve unwavering. Mr. Patterson nodded, understanding my stance. "I know, Elizabeth. I just thought you should be aware. We're handling it, trying to get him the help he needs." As Mr. Patterson left, I stood there, a sense of finality washing over me. George's downfall was his own doing, a consequence of his actions and choices. While I hoped he would find some semblance of peace, I knew my path lay elsewhere. Turning back to Matthew, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Our experiences had brought us closer, and together we were embarking on a new chapter, one filled with hope and the promise of making a difference. In the quiet of the evening, as the sun set on the horizon, I realized that this journey had not only been about revenge or justice. It had been a journey of self-discovery, of finding my voice and reclaiming my life. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and I stepped into it with a heart full of hope and a spirit unbroken. "How could he do this to us?" I muttered under my breath, bile rising in my throat as I took in the sight before me. My loving husband of 15 years, John, was strolling through the amusement park, his arm wrapped around the waist of a tall blonde. Laughing alongside them was a young boy around 6 or 7, gleefully clutching a stuffed animal prize. I grabbed Lily's hand, my fingers trembling. "Lily, honey," I choked out. "Let's go on the carousel, okay?" I steered my confused daughter away from the painful scene, barely holding myself together. Just hours earlier, John had kissed Lily on the cheek and wished her a happy birthday before rushing off for an emergency client meeting. And here he was, breaking promise after promise. I helped Lily onto a painted horse before settling onto my own with a deep exhale, struggling to gather my swirling thoughts. John and I had been college sweethearts, two idealistic kids ready to take on the world, mooning over dreams of a perfect family someday. After graduation, through lean times and multiple job switches, we had built a good life together. Or so I believed. We both worked hard, John as a marketing director and me a freelance CPA, hustling to pay the bills and save for Lily's future while still finding little moments of joy together as family. Sure, money had been tighter since I stepped back on work to care for Lily, and our date nights weren't as frequent anymore amid our tiring routines. But I thought our relationship was rooted in devotion and trust. I even overlooked John's recent distractedness as work stress. Oh, how wrong I was, that sneaking bastard! I glanced over at Lily, who was happily oblivious, giggling away on her carousel horse, my heart squeezed with anger at John's careless selfishness. By running off with some tramp, he was also abandoning his daughter on her 10th birthday. As we walked around after the ride, I slipped into numb autopilot, not trusting myself to hold it together if I dwelled any more on John's betrayal. I had to put on a brave smile for Lily's sake on her special day. We played carnival games, snacked on cotton candy, and laughed on the roller coasters. With each passing moment, though, I struggled to bury the simmering hurt and fury. Finally, as we exited yet another ride, Lily turned to me with questioning eyes. "Mom, it's been really fun today, but I kinda thought Dad would be here too." She trailed off uncertainly. "Is he going to come later for the fireworks?" The hope shining through my little girl's face unleashed a floodgate of long-suppressed emotions. I couldn't hold back the burning tears anymore. "Oh, sweetheart," I wrapped Lily in a fierce, protective hug as sobs racked my body. She deserved to know the truth. I swiped at my running mascara and met her alarmed eyes. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I saw your dad here earlier. He was with another lady and boy." I watched Lily closely for her reaction. Confusion clouded her features. "What do you mean with them?" she asked hesitantly. I took a deep breath before continuing gently. "Honey, he had his arm around that woman, like he does with me sometimes, and he was playing with the boy too, winning him prizes." Lily's face fell as understanding dawned. "You mean, like a date? But dads don't go on dates with other moms. Does this mean he doesn't want to spend time with us anymore?" My heart cracked hearing the tremor in her small voice. I squared my shoulders, steeling my resolve right then. John may have betrayed me as a partner, but I would not let him hurt my little girl so callously. "Oh, Lily, I honestly don't know why your dad did this, but no matter what, we have each other. I'll always be here for you, okay?" I squeezed her hand supportively. Lily rushed into my arms again, hugging me tightly. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. Those 4 words were like a soothing balm, nourishing my soul and strengthening my conviction to shield Lily from further heartache in whatever ways necessary. As I held my brave daughter close, staring out at the colorful horizon, I sensed a new chapter dawning. No more blind trust without verification when it came to John. For Lily's well-being, I would get to the bottom of his shady behavior. If he thought he could just walk all over us while I dutifully covered for him, he had another thing coming. For now, I had a little girl's birthday magic to preserve at all costs. But soon enough, John would have to own up. Justice would be served one way or another. After all, this was just Act 1, and the real fireworks were yet to come. Over the next few weeks, I struggled to act normal whenever John was around. I didn't dare confront him yet without concrete proof of his betrayal. So I swallowed the acid words on the tip of my tongue each time he casually pecked my check after returning home late from another business meeting. The gnawing pit in my stomach grew more cavernous with each of his transparent lies. My raging suspicions were all but confirmed when I overheard John murmuring affectionately into his phone one night after he assumed I was asleep. I crept closer to the home office door and pressed my ear against it. "I missed you too, Jess," John chuckled softly. "Yesterday was so much fun. I can't stop thinking about our time together." Jess. Short for Jessica, perhaps? So the backstabbing weasel was on a first-name basis with his floozy girlfriend. I dug my nails into my clammy palms, struggling to restrain my disgust. John continued reminiscing in hushed tones about some resort getaway filled with cozy dinners and stolen kisses. My lungs constricted, bile rising in my throat. So, while John claimed to be on work trips, he was actually wining and dining his mistress at fancy hotels. I couldn't stomach hearing another word. I retreated back to our bedroom on unsteady feet, my earlier suspicion hardening into cold, hard fury. The next morning, I dropped Lily off at school before driving over to John's office. I simply had to clear the air once and for all. Surely there was an innocent misunderstanding. My loyal husband of 15 years would never actually cheat on me. With every mile, I desperately tried convincing myself of this alternate rosy reality. But when I stepped through the polished doors, my last hopes were dashed. "Why, yes, John Mitchell just left for Memphis," his startled secretary Evelyn confirmed. "He'll be meeting clients there before returning next Tuesday." Memphis. not the Jersey headquarters he had specifically mentioned to me in passing over breakfast. Throat constricting, I turned on my heels and fled to the safety of my vehicle before Evelyn could glimpse the hot tears of frustration stinging my eyes. Resting my head warily against the steering wheel, my last illusions withered away. My husband was indeed having an affair behind my back. Over the next week, my state of mind deteriorated into a foggy mess of anxiety and sorrow. I continued probing for the elusive truth, despite already knowing it deep down. When John didn't return on the expected Tuesday, instead extending his trip another 4 days, I hit my breaking point. As I tidied his drawers while sorting laundry, a flowery perfume wafted out that I didn't recognize. Underneath the folds, a lace negligee of a much smaller size than my own laid provocatively. That did it. All restraint evaporated instantly like steam. Snatching my purse with trembling hands while fighting angry tears, I convinced our next-door neighbor Jane to watch Lily for the night. Before I lost my nerve, I hopped into an Uber bound for the seedier side of town. It was time for drastic measures. I hesitated only briefly outside room 17B as the muffled sounds of ecstasy leaked under the door. Then, steeling my shaking bones, I boldly pushed inside. The exhibition of twisting limbs and tangled sheets burned my eyes, but I forced myself to keep watching through narrowed slits. No backing down now. I needed to see my cheating scumbag husband in all his whoring glory to file for the strongest divorce case possible. To think I had wasted years of loyalty and intimacy on this spineless loser humping the mattress without a care in the world. As they both erupted into climax, I whipped out my smartphone to capture the money shot. Click, click, click. Undisputable proof of adultery. No denying it now with this lurid footage in hand. "What the hell?" John shouted as the naked woman under him, likely Jessica, let loose an ear-piercing shriek. Their interlocked body parts scrambled to hide under the rumpled covers, but I had already seen enough. More than enough for multiple lifetimes, unfortunately. I smirked vindictively, pocketing my smoking gun evidence as the color drained from John's stubbled features. He began sputtering. "Susan, I can exp," but I slammed the door mid-sentence. Time to finally bust this pathetic cheater with the power of truth. My fulminating heart nearly rejoiced, picturing the fallout headed his way. The amusement park stretched before us in all its frenetic glory, a whirling kaleidoscope of colors under the bright summer sun. I squeezed Lily's hand tightly, hoping to infuse some of my nervous energy into her smaller frame. As we walked through the cheering crowds, nausea churned my otherwise empty stomach. This was it, the confrontation I had obsessed over planning since that sordid night at the hotel. When I stumbled upon John canoodling his busty mistress mid-thrust, I knew my decade-long marriage was finished. Once Lily turned 18, there would be nothing binding me to that cheating scumbag any longer. But I couldn't let my sweet Lily go on believing in her father's devotion any longer either. She had moped for days when John missed her chorus recital to extend his work trip. Meanwhile, that two-timing bastard was likely wining and dining Jessica at some five-star restaurant without a care in the world. An acidic fury licked my veins, imagining Lily continuing to pine for her father's affection that would never come. No, it was time she witnessed exactly what John prioritized over family. I would finally expose his true duplicitous colors. As we meandered through the park, scanning the swelling crowds, my heart pounded a frantic staccato beat. Where was that rat? Lily prattled on excitedly about rides, but her voice faded to background static against the rushing blood in my ears. And then suddenly, I spotted him. Talking to a caramel-haired woman by the funnel cake stand, his beefy arm draped possessively around her waist. At their feet stood a young boy with a thatch of chestnut hair, likely no older than 7. He was eagerly stuffing his face with confetti-dusted fried dough, getting sugar all over his round cheeks. My fists involuntarily clenched, and I nudged Lily gently. "See that man over there in the red shirt, sweetie?" I softly murmured against her hair. As she glanced over, her eyes doubled in size. "Daddy?" Lily screeched in disbelief. "Who is that lady with him and the little boy?" She whipped her head back and forth between me and John frantically as realization sunk in. Meanwhile, John had heard Lily's cry, his cocky grin melting like hot wax. His arm dropped from Jessica's waist as they spun to face us. I stalked closer, keeping a firm grip on Lily's clammy palm. Halting an arm's length away, I fixed my estranged husband with a blistering glare that could melt steel. "Well, isn't this quite the father-son outing, John?" I spat, vitriol coating each syllable. "Or maybe this blonde bombshell is just your new mommy replacement for when I kick you to the curb." John paled further as a sheen of sweat beaded his pasty skin. "Susan, let me explain," he choked out weakly. I cut off his pathetic sputtering with a disgusted snort as Jessica stared fixedly at the ground. "Save your smarmy excuses. Nothing justifies abandoning your wife and daughter to play house with this home-wrecking bimbo." I growled savagely. Meanwhile, poor Lily looked utterly lost and crestfallen as her fantasy father figure withered before her eyes. Seeing those fat alligator tears shimmering along her lashes fueled my raging inferno even hotter. "Is this why you are always too busy with work to spend time with me, Daddy?" Lily finally croaked out. John's shoulders slumped further as shame painted his features. He reached towards our daughter pleadingly, but she instantly recoiled several steps. "Bug, it's complicated. I never meant to hurt you or Mommy." I quickly intervened before he could poison Lily's mind with more deception. Having my innocent child comforting this cheating trash was unacceptable. Snatching Lily close before she could absorb more trauma, I addressed John with blistering contempt. "You sniveling coward are hereby cut off from our lives. I wasted too many years blinded by your lies already. Let's go, Lily." Keeping my head high, I steered us swiftly towards the park exit without another backwards glance. As we retreated from the battlegrounds, a bittersweet sensation flooded my frayed nerves. I had shielded Lily from further manipulation and uncover the ugly truth as promised. She would undoubtedly have many confusing emotions to process in the coming days. But moving forward, we could rebuild our lives free of John's contaminating presence. What lay ahead might seem uncertain, but embracing this new destiny solo could only lead to bigger and better things. I awoke with a jolt, instantly oriented to my unfamiliar surroundings. The floral wallpaper and lacy curtains were a far cry from my bedroom's simple blue hues. Then the events of the previous night came thundering back. That disastrous confrontation at the amusement park, which ended with John pathetically begging on his knees, a snotty mess of tears and excuses. Jessica and her son had already scurried off by then, not daring to meet my incensed glare. The raging aftermath was truly a sight to behold, apparently, with crowds of spectators gawking. After threatening John with a restraining order if he dared show his despicable face again, I hurried a shell-shocked Lily back home to safety. We collapsed into bed early, emotionally drained from the day's dramatic unraveling. Now, as morning light bathed the cozy cottage interior, I heard a soft rap at the bedroom door. I opened it to find Lily's petite frame swimming in an oversized t-shirt, her blonde curls a tangled bedhead. Wordlessly, I pulled my baby girl close, cocooning her in my warmth. We soon headed downstairs, lured by the delicious scent of Alice's famous blueberry pancakes. My college roommate had graciously offered her seaside vacation home when she heard of my impending separation. "You and Lily take however long you need," Alice urged last night over the phone. "Frank and I rarely use the Cape May place anyway." So this would be our safe haven until the divorce dust settled and I figured out longer-term housing. John may have shattered my rosy dreams, but I refused to crumble. I had a child relying on me. After enjoying Alice's fluffy stacks drowned in maple and some much-needed girl talk, Lily wandered outside to explore the beach. Gazing after her through the large kitchen windows, I let out a heavy sigh. My poor daughter didn't deserve any of this ugliness and betrayal after already losing her mother so young. At that moment, my cell vibrated loudly against the granite countertops. I glanced down to see John's goofy contact photo flashing insistently. Speak of the devil himself. Swiping angrily, I answered the call. Might as well rip the Band-Aid off fully regarding where things stood. "Susan!" John's voice crackled desperately through the speakers. "Thank God you answered. Please don't hang up." Rolling my eyes in disgust, I growled, "You have 2 minutes, John. Make it quick." "I just wanted to explain everything. This whole mess with Jessica just got out of hand." He rushed on, not bothering to hide the desperation in his tone. "Please, I'll do anything. Counseling, quit my job, just don't leave." "Are you quite finished?" I snapped sharply. "Why should I believe anything spewing from your lying mouth? Does our decade together mean so little that you'd throw it away for some cheap trollop? No, I swear she meant nothing, John sputtered. It was only a stupid fling. I was selfish and weak. But I want to fix us. Please, Susan, I'm begging you. Think of our family. His words ignited a white-hot fury. I briefly imagined marching over to throttle some sense into that thick, stupid skull. How dare you appeal to family values after sneaking around behind our backs for who knows how long? I saw the text messages and racy lingerie, John, I snarled. Man up and take accountability for once. Consider this your final notice that I'm filing for divorce. I relished hitting the red end button on his sputtering excuses, feeling fully empowered by my conviction. The rose-tinted glasses had shattered fully, leaving no doubt remaining. Loyalty meant nothing to someone who could lie through their teeth so easily to my face all this time. Well, no more. I refused to waste another minute questioning my worth because of his moral failing. A new life awaited where Lily and I could thrive happily without John's toxicity. My attorney had already been contacted to proceed with the separation filing. Today marked the first strides towards an abuse-free future. Heading back outside into the salty ocean breeze, I joined my daughter constructing sandcastles, the horizon filled with nothing but boundless possibility. I tapped my foot impatiently against the worn linoleum, assaulting the last cold dregs of my coffee. Where was he? John better not stand me up again and leave me waiting here like an idiot. Not after explicitly requesting to meet one last time for closure. Mercifully, the nondescript diner door chimed open then. I spotted John shuffling towards my corner booth, appearing almost timid. Once seated across from me, though, his earlier contrition evaporated instantly. Leaning back against cracked red vinyl, John crossed his arms defiantly. All right, let's talk. But before you go making any rash decisions, Susan, hear me out. I want shared custody of Lily. I choked on my own saliva. Excuse me, you must be out of your mind, I countered through wheezing breaths. John barreled on aggressively. That adorable little girl deserves a father figure in her life. You honestly want to rob Lily of that joy? And disrupt her sense of normalcy even more? His beady eyes glinted with cunning determination. My fingernails carved half-moon indentations into my sweaty palms under the table. This manipulative snake thought he still could dictate terms? You lost any paternal privileges cheating on our family, John, I seethed quietly. Lily requires way more care and attention than you ever provided her anyway. Oh, please, John snorted derisively. I may have screwed up recently, but don't pretend it was all rainbows and sunshine before. With you off pampering high-end clients at all hours, poor Lily barely saw either of us most days. His accusations ignited my simmering rage into a full rolling boil. I fought the almost uncontrollable urge to lunge across the table and throttle John's thick neck. How dare you pin your neglect on my workload? I spat contemptuously instead. At least those clients guaranteed Lily's school funds, clothes, extracurriculars over the years, things she always had to beg her deadbeat father for. John at least had the decency to appear abashed, picking at non-existent lint. After a charged beat, he mumbled weakly, Jessica, she made me feel alive again, like before we became bogged down with so many responsibilities. Lifting his eyes beseechingly to meet my stony gaze, he implored, Can't we just try counseling, Susan? I can't lose you both. I surveyed John's aging visage critically, the wrinkles etching hard lines, bald patch spreading, and paunch steadily expanding. Was this really the same man I fell for years ago when his sculpted arms could effortlessly lift me against his firm chest? That John was long gone, apparently, replaced by this shallow, selfish imposter twiddling his thumbs across from me. I exhaled slowly, feeling the fight seep away. No, John. Too much damage is done. I saw the real you that night. Your complete apathy at destroying Lily's innocence and trust. As her mother, I refuse to let you keep poisoning her mind and self-worth. Pushing up from the table, I leaned across and fixed John with an icy glare. Consider this your final notice. If I see you anywhere near me or Lily again, I won't hesitate getting a restraining order. John lunged forward to grab my wrist pleadingly. Please, Susan, be reasonable. We can still fix this. I need you both. Wrenching my hand back forcefully, I tossed a crumpled 20 on the table that would easily cover both our untouched meals. John called after me desperately, but I didn't pause, pushing into bright daylight and taking a deep restorative gulp. The fresh outdoor air filled my lung with newfound clarity. I felt fully unburdened from my past illusions. John refusing accountability cemented I made the right call, kicking him to the curb for good. Settling behind my steering wheel, resolve coursed through me stronger than ever. I would inform my lawyer about John's delusional custody demands immediately to get that scum out of our lives quicker. The court would take one look at his sloppy appearance today, bloodshot eyes, tousled hair, mismatched shoes, and declare him an unfit parent easily. Peeling out onto the open road ahead, I cranked up the radio defiantly. 2 middle fingers saluted the shrinking diner behind me. John wanted a cutthroat legal battle? Oh, he would sorely regret awakening this mama bear's wrath. Deep breaths, Lily, sweetheart. We're in this together, okay? I squeezed my daughter's hand reassuringly as we exited the idling Uber. The courthouse facade towered over us, seeming to mock my frayed nerves. After months of exhausting paperwork, financial untangling, and legal maneuvering, we had finally arrived on Judgment Day. I prayed the Honorable Judge Dalton presiding over the proceedings today saw facts for what they were, that John was a lying, cheating scumbag undeserving of time with my precious daughter. As we navigated towards the assigned courtroom, a familiar grating voice accosted us from behind. "There are my 2 favorite girls." Spinning on my kitten heels, I came face to face with the devil himself. John, in his grubby flesh and slightly disheveled suit, grinning like the moron he was. I quickly stepped in front of Lily, blocking his path. She peeked around my frame warily as I crossed my arms forbiddingly. "Don't come any closer, John. We have nothing left to discuss." His greasy smile remained pasted in place. "Susan, please, we shouldn't fight anymore. It's not good for Lily," he implored with faux sincerity. "I just want to be a family again." "Liar!" Lily suddenly shouted, face scrunching angrily as she dodged under my arm. "If you cared about me, you wouldn't have left us for that blonde witch." I gently tugged Lily back as she vented loudly. While immensely satisfied at my typically soft-spoken daughter finding her voice, I didn't need John's dramatics jeopardizing our case. Sure enough, he instantly switched tactics, amping up the waterworks for arriving spectators. "Lillian, how can you say that? You know you're Daddy's special girl. I never meant to hurt anyone. Please, just come give me a hug." He stretched his meaty arms towards Lily beseechingly. I quickly intervened, shoving his grabby paws back forcefully. Through gritted teeth I seethed, "Save your sniveling act, John. You lost any shot playing father months ago." Propelling Lily forward, I called over my shoulder, "Let the courts finally set you straight." Settling into the creaky wooden benches with Lily tucked protectively under my arm, I steadied my nerves with deep breaths. We could do this. Justice would be served. I stroked Lily's baby fine hair soothingly as we awaited kickoff. Right on cue, an authoritative voice bellowed, "Mitchell versus Mitchell, presiding Judge Dalton." We approached the podium as John did the same, keeping my expression schooled neutral. What followed next was a tedious hour rehashing the same tired arguments from our mediation session. John begged for leniency as an imperfect human, while I calmly recapped his endless lies and manipulation. Finally, Judge Dalton, an austere woman with spectacles perched severely on her nose, intervened. "Enough, Mr. Mitchell. While your transgressions alone don't necessarily forfeit custody rights, Mrs. Mitchell makes valid claims to your parental unsuitability." John instantly reddened, opening his mouth for rebuttal, but the judge steamrolled on. "There are concerning patterns here: missed school events, financial negligence regarding child support, empty promises that understandably eroded the mother-daughter trust." My heart swelled, hearing Judge Dalton finally hold John accountable. Justice was being served. Therefore, I hereby grant Mrs. Mitchell full physical and legal custody of Lillian Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell will be restricted to supervised monthly visits pending evaluation of sustained behavioral changes. She banged her gavel decisively. Court adjourned. The celebratory leap from our bench jostled several loose papers, but I didn't care one iota about decorum in that spectacular moment. Laughing joyously, I twirled a similarly elated Lily in gleeful circles. Nearby, John stood motionless, ashen-faced, as the bailiff approached to escort him out, while rattling off next steps for scheduling visit supervisor meetings. But suddenly, John shrugged off the restraint, charging towards us wildly. "You heartless bitch!" he roared, spittle flying. "You can't steal my daughter away!" Security lunged to apprehend John's bulk as he thrashed violently like a rabid animal, his blistering gaze promising unfinished business even while being dragged away in handcuffs. I instinctively clutched Lily tighter to shield her from the horrifying outburst. But as John disappeared from view, I slowly exhaled the lingering tension. We had endured the worst already. The legal system would protect us from here on out. Today commemorated much-awaited closure and the dawn of a hopeful new chapter. I tapped my heels impatiently against scuffed linoleum, assaulting the last cold dregs of my coffee. The airport lounge television was tuned to some mindless mid-morning talk show, volume muted. Where was that blasted connection flight from Houston? Lily craned her neck expectantly beside me. We had been awaiting my parents' arrival for over 6 hours now after unexpected weather delays along their journey from Florida. Their impending first visit since my divorce, finalized last month, carried special meaning. Mother would certainly dissect every detail of the legal battle and aftermath, offering her signature, unfiltered feedback. While normally exhausting, I knew her unique perspective might provide needed closure. My phone suddenly dinged with an incoming news alert. I skimmed the notification headline casually, before instantly doing a double take as the words registered fully. Biz exec John Mitchell's affair, outburst go viral, career in tailspin. Heart racing, I urgently tapped the link for more details as Lily peered over my shoulder curiously. The damning article that loaded was accompanied by the very courthouse steps photo capturing John's crazed eruption towards Lily and I weeks earlier. So that's what had been the mysterious incident. Vague whispers alluded to around John's abrupt departure from the company. I scrolled hungrily, the scandalous details sating my nosy appetite. Apparently, the amateur courthouse footage had spread rapidly across social media last month. Once John's identity was leaked by tipsters, all hell broke loose. The very workplace that once celebrated John's swaggering bravado apparently couldn't distance themselves fast enough from the wife-abandoning, tantrum-throwing villain caught on tape. Once the social media wagons circled to dig up more dirt, local press had begun circling like vultures. John's 19-year-old mistress, Jessica Stanforth's Instagram influencer aspirations provided tabloid fodder and tanked overnight. Brazen poolside selfies vanished instantly when the dotting dad community realized they had been funding her lusty lifestyle all along. John himself became persona non grata overnight, both personally and professionally. The article cited inside sources, claiming his employer received endless complaints demanding the snake's firing. Rather than withstand the judgmental scrutiny, John had apparently negotiated a hasty exit, collecting only a fraction of his remaining contract dues. I leaned back against the plastic seat with undisguised relish. So Johnny Boy was finally reaping some bitter karma after decades believing money and status placed him above common decency? Couldn't have happened to a more deserving jackass. Just then, the garbled intercom announced the next flight's long-awaited arrival. As Lily and I eagerly gathered our carry-ons, I made a mental note to clip this exposé for Mother's take later over dinner. She always did relish a salacious takedown of toxic men abusing power. After hasty introductions with the driver holding our name sign, we headed towards baggage claim. I was just pointing out the empty carousel to activate when suddenly a familiar gruff voice bellowed out, "There's my gorgeous girl." Lily's delighted squeal was soon muffled against my stepdad Dave's broad chest as he enfolded her in his signature bear hug. I quickly found myself swept up too against Dave's lumberjack frame alongside Mom's waifish one. As I soaked up the familial affection like a sponge, tears pricked unexpectedly. In my crusade against John's villainy, I had nearly forgotten the power of true unconditional love staring right at me. On the drive over, with Lily chattering happily from her perch between my parents, I gazed out at the sun-speckled skyscrapers buzzing by outside. The future shimmered with possibility now that dead weight had been shed fully. Mom reached over to pat my hand gently, compassion shining from her still youthful features. In her crinkled eyes, I glimpsed the promise of more laughter than tears in this new chapter unfolding. Leaning back against the plush leather, I let the metaphorical dust settle completely. John's downfall was merely collateral damage, amid more profound lessons recently carved painfully but necessarily. Prizing truth and loyalty in all facets of life here on out would steer me right, and my daughter would thrive with fierce feminine role models lighting the way forward. Ooh, where should we hang this one, sweet pea? I smiled down at Lily, who was frowning at the newly printed photo in concentration, tongue sticking out adorably. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains in our bare-walled apartment, the fresh start still needing personalization. Maybe next to your accounting certificate, Mommy. Since it's another thing to be really proud of, Lily finally declared decisively. I chuckled and squeezed her shoulders affectionately at the sentiment before moving to hammer the professional portrait of myself in a sleek blazer into place. Stepping back, I surveyed our progress with swelling satisfaction. The chaotic last few months of legally severing from John, finding an affordable apartment, enrolling Lily in a new school, and relaunching my CPA business had certainly stretched me thin. But with my parents' short-term help settling things and providing free childcare, the worst was behind us. I still grappled occasionally with twinges of self-blame for uprooting Lily's stability, but so far she was adjusting admirably to her new bedroom and school community. And with each personalized fixture we assembled, her canopy bed, customized desk area, art collection, I witnessed our little nest become a sanctuary emitting hints of joyful life again. The strident ring of my cell phone interrupted our interior design planning then. I glanced down to see an unknown Denver number flashing insistently. Brow furrowing, I answered cautiously. Likely just another tedious robocall, I assumed, but instead, a hesitant female voice instead asked, am I speaking with Susan Mitchell? I mean Susan Hayes? I stiffened warily. Who was this, and how had they tracked down my cell or new legal name change? Speaking, and you are? I prompted crisply when she didn't immediately elaborate. Oh, terribly sorry. I should have introduced myself first. I'm Martha Reed. I was hoping we could talk. She rushed on breathlessly as I struggled placing the unfamiliar name. Again, you have me at a loss here, Ms. Reed, I countered bluntly, instinctually protective against unsolicited intrusions after the media spectacle lately. What is this regarding? An awkward pause followed before Martha replied delicately, as if choosing words carefully. Well, this is rather sensitive, but I wanted to provide a heads up. I recently left John Mitchell after discovering overlaps in our relationships. I nearly dropped the phone as her shy confession sank in fully. This total stranger had also been entangled with my lying ex while we were still legally married? I stammered incredulously. Wait, John was dating you while still with me and his little mistress? Unbridled fury clawed up my throat as the room tilted dangerously. That snake truly possessed zero scruples. Martha made sympathetic noises, seemingly misreading my outrage source. I know, it's absolutely shocking discovering his horrid duplicity. I never imagined John deceiving me so callously either, but that courtroom video unlocked the ugly truth. As she prattled on rehashing betrayal wounds, vindication slowly tempered my boiling vitriol. So yet another blameless woman had fallen prey to John's deceitful charm offensives before recognizing his true colors eventually. At least we could commiserate over hard lessons learned about the false fronts certain master manipulators wear. I gently intercepted Martha's tangent at the next natural pause. Well, I truly appreciate you two taking the initiative to contact me and share your experience. It definitely confirms John's pathological patterns. I chuckled mirthlessly before adding, I mainly feel sorry for whichever poor soul gets ensnared by him next once the charm stocks dwindle. We exchanged a few more pleasantries about moving forward solo as strong, wiser women. After securing Martha's number just in case, I finally hung up, feeling fully reinforced in my life redirect. Lily glanced up from her coloring inquisitively, but I just shook my head, smiling. No need exposing her innocence to John's endless deceptions. She embodied our bright future ahead rather than past darkness. The evening air felt heavier as I pushed open the door to our modest living room, the familiar scent of home now laced with the tension of the unknown. Dean? My voice, steadier than I felt, cut through the silence. No answer. The house seemed to hold its breath as I moved towards the kitchen, the heart of our daily life, now the stage for a revelation that would shatter everything. There, amidst the scattered evidence of a hastily abandoned meal, stood Dean, his back to me, frozen mid-motion. Beside him, Alara, my once trusted friend, her face a poorly masked tableau of guilt and defiance. The scene before me, stark and unambiguous, rendered words unnecessary, yet I found myself demanding, how long? Dean's turn was slow, his usual confidence replaced by a look I couldn't decipher. Cadence, he started, but the weakness in his voice only fueled my growing storm. Alara spoke next, her tone brazen. Why act so surprised, Cadence? You must have seen this coming. Her words, sharp and reckless, aimed to wound. The pain of betrayal, deep and acute, threatened to overwhelm me, but I stood my ground. You were my friend, Alara, and you, I turned to Dean, you took vows. Our son, our family, do they mean nothing to you? Dean's attempt at justification fell flat, his excuses sounding hollow even to his own ears. It's not what you think, Cadence. We just found comfort in each other. I finished for him, my voice cold, my heart colder. And you thought I wouldn't find out? Thought I'd just accept this? The confrontation, charged with betrayal and hurt, laid bare the fissures in our lives. Dean, struggling to articulate his rationale, and Alara, defiant in her role as the other woman, represented everything I had to fight against. This was not just a personal betrayal. It was a war on the life we had built, on the promises made in the presence of love and trust. As I stood there, facing the two people who had jointly dismantled my trust, my resolve hardened. This was not the end of my story, but the beginning of my fight. For my dignity, for my son, for the life I deserved beyond the shadows of deceit. I want you out, I said finally, my voice steady, my decision irrevocable. Both of you, tonight. Dean's protest was weak, Alara's silence a confirmation of her guilt. As they gathered their things, the weight of the moment settled on me. This was not just a confrontation. It was the first step towards reclaiming my life, towards a future where I no longer played the part of the unsuspecting victim. The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Alone, yet unbroken, I knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something powerful within me. A determination to rise from the ashes of this betrayal, to forge a new path on my terms. And so, amid the ruins of my fractured life, I began to plan. For justice, for revenge, for a new beginning. The journey ahead would be long, but I was ready. The morning after Dean and Alara's departure, the house felt eerily silent, a void filled with echoes of the confrontation. The silence, however, was a canvas for my determination, a stark reminder of the betrayal and the need for action. I started the day with a purpose, reaching out to Lara, an old friend, and the one person I knew who could help me navigate the legal intricacies of what lay ahead. Lara, it's Cadence. I need your advice, legal advice. Her response was immediate, a testament to our enduring friendship. I'll be there in an hour. We'll figure this out together. As I waited, I couldn't help but replay last night's events, not with sadness, but with a growing sense of empowerment. By the time Lara arrived, I was ready, armed with the facts and fueled by a resolve to seek justice. Lara's expertise was invaluable. First, we secure your financial stability and custody of your son. Then, we address the betrayal. Dean and Alara cannot just walk away from this unscathed. Her plan was meticulous, a blend of legal strategy and personal vindication. We'll start by freezing the joint accounts and filing for sole custody. As for Alara, it's time she learns actions have consequences. The strategy session turned into action quickly. Lara's connections expedited the legal proceedings, and within days, Dean found himself confronted with the reality of his choices. You can't do this, Cadence. You're destroying everything. His voice, once confident, now pleaded over the phone. This is the bed you made, Dean. Now you lie in it. I responded, my voice void of the affection that once colored our conversations. Alara's reaction was of similar disbelief, her previous arrogance replaced with panic. Cadence, please, let's talk about this. We can find a way to make things right. There's nothing left to discuss. You both made your choices, and now you face the consequences, I replied, the finality in my voice mirroring the closure I sought. With Lara's help, the legal battles were swift, leaving Dean and Alara reeling from their losses. But revenge was not solely about legal victories. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about showing that betrayal of trust comes at a price. The community's reaction only added to their downfall. Friends and neighbors, once mutual confidants, sided with me, their disdain for Dean and Alara's actions evident in their support and the isolation that followed for the two of them. As the dust settled on the legal confrontations, a new sense of peace began to take root within me. The betrayal that once threatened to define my existence now served as a catalyst for my transformation. I was no longer the victim, but the architect of my destiny, a woman reborn from the ashes of deceit. With the legal battles behind me, the victory felt hollow. The community's support, while comforting, couldn't fill the void left by Dean's betrayal. It was time to rebuild, to focus on my son and the future we deserved. Yet, the shadow of vengeance lingered, a reminder that justice served did not equate to wounds healed. My resolve was tested when I encountered Dean at a mutual friend's gathering. His presence, once familiar and comforting, now sparked a tumult of emotions. "Cadence," he began, his voice tinged with regret. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." The sincerity in his eyes tempted me to believe, to forgive. But the scars of betrayal ran deep. "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Dean. You chose this path, not me," I replied, my words laced with the pain and strength forged from the ordeal. The encounter with Dean was a turning point, a realization that while legal revenge had been exacted, emotional closure was elusive. It was a lesson in the complexity of forgiveness, in the distinction between justice served and peace attained. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work and into being a mother. My son, innocent, in the wake of our shattered family, became my anchor, his laughter a balm for my soul. Through him I saw the possibility of a future unmarred by the past, a life rebuilt on the foundation of resilience and love. Yet, the journey of healing was not without its challenges. Alara, undeterred by her fall from grace, sought redemption in the eyes of those who had turned their backs. "Cadence, can we talk?" her message read, a plea for understanding, if not forgiveness. The decision to meet her was not easy. Face to face, the woman who had been my friend, then my betrayer, now sought my mercy. "I was wrong," she admitted, her eyes reflecting the weight of her choices. "I've lost everything, but I've learned. I'm truly sorry." The words I had longed to hear, yet their arrival brought no satisfaction. Forgiveness was a journey, not a destination, a path I was still navigating. "I appreciate your apology, Alara, but I can't undo the past, and I can't erase the pain. Maybe in time we'll both find peace." The days turned into weeks, each one a step further from the past and closer to a future I was still shaping. My world, once defined by the actions of others, now took form around the choices I made for myself and for my son. The legal victories and public vindication had faded into the background, replaced by the quieter, more challenging work of rebuilding from within. My journey was interrupted by an unexpected encounter with Dean at a community event. This time, his approach was hesitant, respectful of the distance I had put between us. "Cadence, I've been doing a lot of thinking," he started, his voice carrying a sincerity I hadn't heard before. "I know I can't change the past, but I'm here, trying to be a better person for our son." The mention of our child, the innocent caught in the crossfire of our decisions, softened the hard edges of my resolve. "He deserves the best of both of us," I admitted, the shared love for our son a bridge over the chasm of our past. This acknowledgement marked a shift, a door opening to the possibility of co-parenting with grace, if not friendship. The dialogue between us, once charged with anger and accusation, now treaded the delicate terrain of cooperation and mutual respect for the sake of the child who needed us both. In this new chapter, the antagonist of my story was no longer Dean or Alara, but the bitterness that threatened to poison my future. The realization that forgiveness was not a gift to those who wronged me, but a liberation for myself, began to take root. The process was neither easy nor immediate. There were days when the hurt resurfaced, a reminder of the scars that would never fully disappear. Yet, with each passing day, the choice to forgive, to release the hold of past grievances, became a little easier, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Amidst this personal evolution, a surprising ally emerged in Lara. Her unwavering support had been my anchor through the storm, and now she offered wisdom on the journey of forgiveness. "Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die," she reminded me one afternoon. "Forgiveness is for you, Cadence. It's the path to peace." Her words echoed in my heart, a mantra for the days when the weight of the past felt too heavy. And so I leaned into the discomfort, embracing the complex, often messy process of healing and forgiveness. The landscape of my life, once marred by betrayal and hurt, was slowly reshaping into something new, something hopeful. The process of forgiveness had led me down a path of unexpected growth, teaching me that even in the wake of devastation there can be renewal. In this new chapter, I found myself taking steps towards a future I had once thought impossible. My days were filled with the laughter of my son, the support of friends, and the satisfaction of personal achievements. The shadow of Dean and Ilara's betrayal had not disappeared, but had faded into the background, a part of my past that no longer defined me. An opportunity for a fresh start presented itself in the form of a new job, one that promised not just financial stability, but a chance to pursue my passions. "This is your moment, Cadence," Lara encouraged me the day I received the offer. "You've earned this." The decision to accept was easy, propelled by the desire to provide for my son and to prove to myself that I could rise above the challenges that had once threatened to consume me. "We're going to make a great life. Just you and me," I whispered to my son, his small hand in mine, a symbol of our unbreakable bond. But life, as it often does, had more lessons in store for me. Dean's attempt to re-enter our lives, not as a partner but as a father seeking redemption, tested the boundaries of forgiveness I had worked so hard to establish. "I don't want to disrupt your lives, I just want to be a part of his," Dean said during one of our cautious, awkward meetings, gesturing towards our son. The complexity of emotions his request evoked was a reminder of the delicate balance between forgiveness and self-preservation. Yet, watching my son's tentative interactions with Dean, I recognized the value of reconciliation, not for Dean's sake, but for the innocent child who deserved to know his father. This period of adjustment was not without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, of fear that opening this door would invite back the pain I had fought so hard to overcome. But there were also moments of unexpected joy, of witnessing the tentative rebuilding of a relationship between father and son, grounded in cautious hope rather than blind trust. As the seasons changed, so too did the fabric of our lives, weaving a tapestry of resilience, forgiveness, and cautious optimism. The new job had not only brought financial stability, but also a renewed sense of self-worth and purpose. My son thrived in this environment of love and security, his laughter a constant reminder of why every struggle was worth enduring. However, life's narrative is seldom without conflict, and it wasn't long before a new challenge emerged, one that would test the strength of the fragile peace we had built. Ilara, having navigated her own journey of loss and self-reflection, sought to re-enter our lives, not as a friend or foe, but as someone seeking closure and possibly redemption. "Cadence, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need to make amends," she said during an unexpected encounter at a mutual acquaintance's gathering. The emotions her presence stirred were complex, a mixture of old wounds reopening and the recognition of shared human frailty. Her request for forgiveness, while sincere, demanded a level of magnanimity that felt almost insurmountable. Yet, in the spirit of the growth and healing I had committed to, I found myself willing to listen, if not fully ready to absolve. The dialogue between us was hesitant, each word measured, a dance around the pain of the past and the uncertainty of the future. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, Ilara, but I'm willing to try to understand," I responded, acknowledging the power of forgiveness to heal not just the recipient, but the giver as well. This encounter, though fraught with emotional landmines, paved the way for a new understanding. Forgiveness, I realized, was not an erasure of the past, but a means of liberating oneself from the chains of bitterness and resentment. In the midst of navigating these personal upheavals, a surprise development at work offered an unexpected opportunity for advancement, a testament to my hard work and dedication. "Cadence, your leadership and innovation have not gone unnoticed. We'd like you to lead the new project," my supervisor announced, recognition that filled me with pride and reaffirmed my belief in my abilities and in the promise of new beginnings. The calm that had settled over my life was deceptive, a brief respite before the next storm. Just as I had begun to navigate the complexities of forgiveness and the challenges of my new role at work, an unexpected development threatened to upend the delicate balance I had achieved. A legal notice arrived without warning, a stark reminder that the past was not as far behind as I had hoped. Dean, motivated by a desire to reassert himself in our son's life, was challenging the custody arrangement. "I just want to be a part of his life, Cadence. I'm not the same man I was," he pleaded over the phone, his words echoing a sentiment I had heard before, yet underpinned by a desperation I hadn't seen in him. The battle lines were drawn once again, not in the courts of law this time, but in the arena of personal conviction and the unresolved tensions that lingered between us. "Our son needs stability, Dean. Your actions have consequences," I responded, the firmness in my voice belying the turmoil within. This new challenge forced me to confront not just Dean, but my own fears and uncertainties about the future. The prospect of revisiting old wounds, of fighting once more for what I believed was right for my son, was daunting. In the midst of this upheaval, Alara reached out, her timing impeccable. "I know we've had our differences, Cadence, but I'm here if you need someone to talk to," she offered, a gesture that, months ago, I would have dismissed outright. Yet, the journey we had both embarked on towards healing and understanding had shifted the dynamics between us. "Thank you, Alara. I appreciate that," I found myself saying, surprised by my own willingness to accept her olive branch. As the days passed, the tension surrounding the custody challenge grew. Meetings with lawyers and mediators became a routine part of my life, each encounter with Dean a test of my resolve and a measure of how far we had both come, and how far we still had to go. The dialogue between us was fraught with the weight of our shared history, each word a testament to the complex web of emotions that bound us. "I'm not trying to take him away from you, Cadence. I just want to be a part of his life," Dean insisted, his plea a mix of sincerity and desperation. The resolution, when it came, was not a victory for one side or the other, but a compromise, a mutual agreement to put our son's needs above our own grievances. "We'll make it work for his sake," I conceded, recognizing the value of co-parenting in a way that provided our son with the love and support of both his parents, even if from a distance. I stood in the sunlit foyer of the luxurious house, my mind racing with doubts. Nathan, my husband of 2 years, was adamant we could afford this $1.5 million property, assured by my father, Harold's promise to help with the down payment. "This place is incredible, Clara. Imagine us hosting dinners here, or the kids playing in that huge garden," Nathan said, his eyes gleaming not with joy but greed. A knot formed in my stomach. "Nathan, even with Dad's help, this is too much. We should be looking at something we can afford on our own." Nathan's face darkened momentarily before he masked it with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But sweetheart, your dad said he would help, right? It's practically a gift." As we wandered through the house, Nathan chatted excitedly about rooms that seemed too grand for our needs. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping into a future we couldn't afford, based not only on financial debt, but also on the moral debt we'd owe to my father. The real estate agent had been distant, letting Nathan lead our tour, but then suddenly, as Nathan stepped out to admire the garden once more, the agent grabbed my arm and pulled me aside into a smaller room, closing the door behind us with a firm click. I was startled. "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry for the abruptness, but there's something you need to know." His face was serious, eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my heart race. "Your husband, you need to get away from him as soon as possible." "Excuse me. What are you talking about?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it trembled despite my efforts. "I know it sounds crazy, but I have a friend who runs a bar on the Las Vegas Strip. Your husband, he's involved in illegal drug trafficking. They caught him just yesterday. I wouldn't be telling you this if I wasn't absolutely sure." My world seemed to tilt on its axis. "No, that can't be, Nathan. My Nathan." He nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. Look, doing this could get me in a lot of trouble, but I felt you should know." I felt like collapsing right there. The luxurious surroundings felt suffocating now, mocking me and my ignorance. Why? Why would he do something like that? Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away, refusing to give in to the despair encroaching upon the edges of my heart. I can't pretend to know his reasons, but for your safety, you should leave him. I can help you if you need it. I shook my head, pulling away from his grasp. No, I need to think. Stumbling out of the room, I barely registered the house around me. Nathan's figure appeared at the end of the hallway, his smile bright as he caught sight of me. There you are. Did you see the walk-in closet? It's as big as our bedroom now. His cheerfulness, once endearing, now felt like a veneer over a rotting core. My heart ached as the man I loved, the man I thought I knew, seemed like a stranger before me. Yes, it's lovely, I managed to say, my voice void of emotion. On our ride home, Nathan chatted nonstop about the house, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. With each word he spoke, I felt more detached, more resolved. The revelation had not only exposed Nathan's deceit, but had also unveiled a path I knew I had to take. I would leave Nathan, but not quietly, not without ensuring he faced the consequences of his actions. The challenge now was gathering the evidence and strength I needed to divorce such a man. Unbeknownst to Nathan, the facade of our marital bliss was about to crumble, and I would be the architect of his undoing. Months before the discovery, I remember Nathan casually proposing over dinner, not with a ring or a bended knee, but with a financial plan that involved my father's wealth. You know, Clara, if we got married, your dad could help us out with the down payment for a house. It's a win-win for everyone, Nathan said, his fork paused midair. I remember staring at him, stunned. Is that your way of proposing to me? The disappointment in my voice was unmistakable. Nathan seemed to realize his blunder and quickly tried to backpedal. No, of course not, babe. I mean, I do want to marry you, absolutely. But you know, the financials are important too, right? The conversation left a sour taste in my mouth, yet the idea of marriage, of committing to a life with Nathan, overshadowed my concerns. I was in love, and perhaps I reasoned Nathan was just being pragmatic. We began house hunting soon after, but Nathan's criteria were clear, only listings above $1 million. Clara, with your dad's help, we can afford these places. Think about the future, our kids, Nathan reasoned every time I objected. But isn't it presumptuous to expect so much from my dad? I protested, feeling uncomfortable with Nathan's entitlement to my father's hard-earned wealth. Presumptuous? Clara, your dad loves you. He wants the best for us. Plus, when he's gone, all of this, he gestured vaguely around us, will be yours anyway. We're just getting a head start. I bit my lip, troubled by Nathan's callousness, but again, I rationalized it away. He was thinking about our future, wasn't he? Or was I just blinded by love? As the wedding approached, my doubts grew, but they were whispers against the louder voices telling me I was making the right choice. I brushed them aside, focusing instead on the beautiful ceremony and the promise of a shared life ahead. That life began to lose its sheen quickly after the vows. Nathan's nights out became more frequent, his dismissals of my concerns more curt. I'm just blowing off some steam before we settle down for good, he'd say. I should have seen it all coming. The late nights, the casual cruelties, the entitlement to my family's money, it was all building up to a revelation that would shatter the facade of our marriage. The warning signs were there, painted in bold strokes I chose to ignore. The night after the house viewing, lying next to Nathan, I felt the distance between us stretch into an unbridgeable chasm. His breaths were even and calm, but mine were ragged, uneven with the weight of my realization. I had married a stranger, a man who wooed me not with love but with calculative designs on my family's wealth. A man who, even now, laid plans in the dark. The urge to wake him, to confront him with accusations and demand answers, was strong. But the logical part of my brain held back, knowing I needed a plan, evidence, and an exit strategy. For all his faults, Nathan was not a fool. He would deny, redirect, and if pushed into a corner, he might grow dangerous. The real estate agent's warning rang true, and I knew I had to tread carefully. As I lay in the dark, plotting my next moves, a sense of clarity settled over me. Nathan's deception had unwittingly gifted me a purpose: to expose him and ensure he couldn't harm anyone else. The path before me was fraught with danger and heartache, but I was determined. Nathan would be exposed for who he truly was, and I would be the one to bring him down. It was a cold comfort, but it steeled my resolve as I planned my next steps in the early hours of the morning. The days following the house viewing were filled with tension. I trod carefully, pretending to be the dutiful wife, while secretly gathering evidence of Nathan's illicit activities. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, I decided to gently probe, seeking cracks in Nathan's facade. "Nathan, have you thought more about the houses we saw? Maybe we should consider something less extravagant." Nathan, fork midair, paused and eyed me with a hint of suspicion. "Why? Your dad is helping us out, right? We should aim high while we have the chance." I pressed on, concealing my growing disgust. "But shouldn't we live within our means? It's not just about a house, Nathan. It's about being responsible, about not taking advantage of my father's generosity." For a moment, a flash of anger crossed Nathan's face, quickly replaced by a sickeningly sweet smile. "Clara, honey, I'm just thinking about our future, about our kids. Don't you want the best for them?" "Of course, I do," I retorted, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside, "but not at the cost of our integrity." Nathan laughed, a sound that once warmed my heart but now chilled me to the bone. "Integrity won't put a roof over our heads or pay for our kids' schooling. Sometimes we have to be practical." The conversation was going nowhere, and I felt a deep sense of alienation. The man sitting across from me, sharing my table, my home, was a stranger. Days turned into weeks, and my discreet inquiries bore fruit. A contact of the real estate agent, willing to share information anonymously, confirmed my worst fears. Nathan was indeed involved in drug trafficking, using his late-night escapades as cover for his dealings. Armed with this information, I wrestled with my next steps. Confronting Nathan outright was risky without having a solid exit plan. But dancing around the truth, living a lie, was suffocating. I decided it was time to take action. While Nathan was out on one of his mysterious errands, I copied his phone logs and text messages. The evidence was damning. Conversations arranging meets, cryptic references to deliveries. It was all there. That night, as I lay next to him, pretending to sleep, I felt a resolve hardening within me. Nathan's breaths, once comforting in their regularity, now sounded like the ticking of a time bomb. The man I married, the man I thought I knew, was a criminal, and I could no longer turn a blind eye. The following day, while Nathan was at work, I made my move. I contacted a lawyer, laying out my situation and the evidence I had gathered. The shock and disappointment in the lawyer's voice were palpable, but so was their determination to help me. "I understand you're going through a lot, Clara, but you're making the right decision coming forward," the lawyer assured me. "We'll need to be strategic about this. We'll help you file for divorce and ensure your safety is the top priority." Feeling a mix of relief and dread, I agreed to their plan. My next call was to my parents, telling them the truth about Nathan, about the lie my marriage had been, was perhaps more difficult than gathering the evidence itself. My father's voice, usually so calm and steady, cracked as he listened. "Clara, we'll support you through this. You're not alone." And just like that, the final piece fell into place. My path was clear. Nathan's deceit would be exposed, and I would be free from his lies. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with legal battles and emotional turmoil, but I was ready. Nathan's time was up, and the justice he so richly deserved was finally within reach. No more lies, no more deceit. I was taking back control of my life, and there was no turning back. With my decision made, the gears of justice slowly began to turn. My conversations with the lawyer became a daily routine, each call a step closer to my liberation from Nathan's deceit. My parents offered unwavering support, their home now my refuge, as I navigated this tumultuous chapter. It wasn't long before Nathan noticed the shift in my demeanor. One evening, as he prepared for yet another business meeting, he cornered me in the kitchen, his usual charm tainted with a hint of desperation. "Clara, darling, you've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" His tone was laced with faux concern, but his eyes scanned my face, searching for weaknesses. I met his gaze, my resolve steeling me against his manipulative tactics. "I've been doing some thinking, Nathan. About us, our marriage, your late nights." Nathan chuckled, a sound void of genuine amusement. "My late nights? Clara, you know how demanding my job is, but hey, it's all for our future, right?" I couldn't help but marvel at his audacity, his ability to lie so effortlessly. "Is that what you call it? Work?" I let the accusation hang in the air, a challenge he wasn't expecting. Nathan's facade cracked, his smile faltering. "What are you implying, Clara? That I'm doing something untoward?" His attempt to regain control was evident, the charm replaced by a thinly veiled threat. I don't need to imply anything, Nathan. I know. The room charged with tension, my words a declaration of war. For a moment, Nathan was silent, his mind racing to calculate his next move. Then, with a sneer, he leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. "And what do you know, my dear wife, that I'm working hard to provide for us? Or has your paranoia gotten the better of you?" His attempt to belittle my concerns, to paint me as irrational, ignited a fire within me. "No, Nathan. I know about the drugs, the trafficking. I know about your business meetings, and I'm putting an end to it." Nathan's reaction was immediate and chilling. His usual mask of charm and confidence shattered, replaced by raw anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You're going to ruin everything over some baseless accusations?" The man before me was no longer the Nathan I married, but a stranger driven by greed and deception. "The only thing being ruined is your illusion, Nathan. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to the police with what I know." The mention of the police seemed to strike a nerve. Nathan's posture stiffened, his anger giving way to panic. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed, the threat clear in his voice. "You have no proof." But I did, and I was ready to use it. "I have more than enough proof, Nathan, and soon everyone will know exactly who and what you are." Realizing his predicament, Nathan's demeanor shifted once more, this time to desperation. "Clara, please, we can sort this out. Don't do something you'll regret." Looking into his eyes, I saw not the man I loved, but a coward, a criminal. "It's too late for regrets, Nathan. You made your choice, and now I've made mine." As I walked away, leaving Nathan to stew in his fear and anger, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The battle ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Nathan's empire of lies was about to crumble, and I would be the one to bring it down. In the days that followed my confrontation with Nathan, I moved quickly, my every action meticulous and deliberate. My lawyer filed the divorce papers, and I gave my statement to the police. Striding out of the precinct, a surreal calm enveloped me. I had punctured the bubble of our pretense marriage, exposing the murky waters beneath. Now it was a matter of waiting, watching the ripples extend outward, disturbing Nathan's carefully crafted lies. When the police took Nathan in for questioning, the reality of his situation seemed to crash down on him. I wasn't there, but my lawyer, acting as a tireless advocate, relayed Nathan's flurry of calls and messages. He oscillated between begging for my forgiveness and vehemently proclaiming his innocence. It was a pathetic display, one that hardened my resolve further. "I can't believe he's still trying to manipulate you, even now," my lawyer remarked during one of our strategy meetings. I merely nodded, my focus unwavering. "He's afraid. He knows he's trapped, and like any cornered animal, he's lashing out. But it won't change anything. The truth is out." The lawsuit unveiled more than I had anticipated. Nathan's affairs were a tangled web of deceit, involving not just drug trafficking, but money laundering and bribery. With each revelation, I felt vindicated in my decision, though the weight of his betrayal was immense. Our day in court arrived, a culmination of weeks of preparation. As I walked through those courtroom doors, the gravity of the situation struck me. It was more than just a criminal trial. It was a public reckoning, a forum where Nathan's facade would be utterly dismantled. Nathan, looking markedly diminished in his prison attire, wouldn't meet my gaze. During the proceedings, as evidence of his crimes was laid bare, his posture slumped further, the reality of his imminent incarceration settling in. After what felt like an eternity, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts. Nathan was sentenced to a significant term, a consequence fitting the magnitude of his crimes. "You've shown incredible strength throughout this ordeal, Clara," my lawyer said as we exited the courtroom, the weight of months lifted off my shoulders. I allowed myself a small, bitter smile. Strength born of necessity. But it's over now. It's time to rebuild. Later, faced with the ruins of my marriage and the public fallout of Nathan's trial, I found solace in my family's unwavering support. My father in particular proved to be my rock, his gentle wisdom guiding me through my darkest moments. "Clara, you've faced adversity with grace and courage," he said one evening as we sat in the quiet living room, reflecting on the tumultuous journey. "You're much stronger than you realize. Tears welled up in my eyes, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. Thank you, Dad. I couldn't have done this without you. Without all of you. As days turned into weeks, Nathan's attempts to reach out became more desperate, more frequent. Letters arrived at my parents' house, filled with apologies, promises of change, attempts to invoke our past love. But that chapter was closed. His words, once capable of swaying me, now fell on deaf ears. The finality of our divorce was a closing ceremony to a painful chapter of my life. With Nathan behind bars, I could finally look to the future, to possibilities once overshadowed by his deceit. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope, of freedom. Nathan's crimes had not only imprisoned him, but me as well. Now, as he served his sentence, I too was released, embarking on a journey of healing and newfound independence. The aftermath of Nathan's deceit was a tempest I had weathered, emerging not unscathed but undeniably stronger. My resolve had been my armor, my relentless pursuit of justice, my sword. And as I stood on the precipice of my new life, I knew that while the scars of the past would always remain, they no longer defined me. In the following months, the stark reality of my situation began to truly settle. With Nathan incarcerated and our divorce finalized, the time had come to rebuild from the ruins he'd left behind. The journey wasn't easy. There were days when anger and betrayal clawed their way back into my heart, days when the loneliness felt unbearable. Yet, it was during these moments of vulnerability that I discovered a resilience I never knew I possessed. One afternoon, a knock at my door heralded an unexpected visitor, Nathan's mother. My stomach knotted at the sight of her, a reminder of the life I had so eagerly wanted to forget. Yet her eyes held a sorrow and shame that mirrored my own. "Clara, she stumbled over her words. "We are so sorry for everything Nathan did to you. We had no idea." Her voice was a whisper, laden with grief. The anger I'd braced myself to feel didn't come. Instead, looking at her, a mother mourning the son she thought she knew, I found a semblance of pity. "Thank you, but you don't have to apologize for Nathan's actions. He made his choices." She handed me an envelope, her hands trembling. "Please take this. It's the least we can do." Inside was a check, a substantial amount, likely their way of compensating for the horror their son had caused. Returning the envelope, I met her eyes. "Keep your money. It won't undo what Nathan did. The best thing you can do is support him in becoming a better person once he's served his time." Her eyes welled with tears as she nodded, understanding. She left quietly, and I closed the door behind her, feeling an unexpected sense of closure. Weeks turned into months, and I threw myself into my work with renewed fervor. It was both a distraction and a pathway to independence. My evenings, once filled with Nathan's shadow, now hosted friends and family whose support became my bulwark against the remnants of my past. One evening, reflecting on the tumultuous events, I realized the extent to which I had grown. The naivety that once clouded my judgment had been seared away, leaving in its wake a sharper, more discerning eye. Nathan's betrayal, while devastating, had unwittingly gifted me a second chance at forging a future on my own terms. The door to love, I believed, had closed the day Nathan's lies came to light. Yet life, as I was learning, was unpredictable. Marcus, a colleague, evolved into a friend whose company became a balm to my bruised heart. Our relationship, built on mutual respect and shared experiences, gradually blossomed into something deeper. "I don't want to replace your past, Clara. I want to build a future where it's just a distant memory," Marcus shared one evening, his hand in mine, a promise shining in his eyes. And in that moment, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of love, a love that was kind, genuine, and untainted by deceit. Nathan's shadow still lingered, a constant reminder of the scars I bore. Yet, as Marcus and I ventured into the unknown together, I felt those shadows recede, replaced by the warmth of new beginnings. As for revenge, the sweetest I could exact was to lead a life filled with happiness, purpose, and love. A life where Nathan became nothing more than a footnote, a painful lesson learned. The road to recovery was long and winding, with its fair share of obstacles. Yet with each step forward, I shed the chains of my past, emerging stronger, more resilient, and most importantly, free. Nathan had sought to define me with his deceit, but in the end, I defined myself through my strength, my will to overcome, and my capacity to love again. My journey wasn't without its nightmares. Dreams where Nathan's voice echoed, taunting, filled my sleep on more nights than I cared to admit. It was during those nights that the reality of my newfound strength was tested, a stark reminder of the darkness I had successfully navigated. But as dawn broke, dispelling the shadows of my fears, I was greeted with the light of my reality, a life rebuilt from the ashes, with Marcus by my side, an unwavering beacon of support and love. Time marched on, healing the wounds Nathan had inflicted. His name, once a constant echo of betrayal, faded into the background, a distant memory that no longer possessed the power to hurt. My work flourished, as did my relationship with Marcus, each day a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It was a crisp autumn morning when the past decided to resurface. Nathan, having served a portion of his sentence, had been released on good behavior, a fact I came to know through an unexpected letter that found its way to me. His words, penned with an air of desperation and remorse, sought forgiveness, a plea for understanding and absolution. Clara, I understand if my words bring pain, but please know I am deeply sorry for the heartache I caused. Prison has given me a lot of time to think, to regret, and to hope for a chance to make amends. The letter read. The trembling of my hands ceased as I read on. His words, designed to evoke sympathy, sparked a different reaction within me, a realization of just how far I had come and how little his apologies meant now. Marcus found me at the kitchen table, the letter discarded beside me. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face as he took in my troubled expression. "It's Nathan," I began, my voice steady. "He's out and he's apologizing." Handing him the letter, I watched as Marcus's eyes skimmed the contents, his jaw setting in a firm line. "He has some nerve," Marcus muttered, his protective instinct flaring. "Are you okay?" I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. "I am." His words, they don't have power over me anymore. I've moved on, more than I thought possible. Marcus enveloped me in his arms, a bastion of comfort and strength. That's all I needed to hear. In that embrace, I felt the final tether to my past dissolve, the final act of Nathan's drama concluding without aplomb. I had transcended the role of the victim, emerging as the author of my own story, one where happiness was not just a fleeting chapter but the theme. As autumn gave way to winter and winter to spring, the life Marcus and I built together flourished. In our home, laughter replaced the silence, and love filled the spaces once clouded by deceit. Nathan's attempt at reconciliation became nothing more than a footnote, a last desperate grasp at a life he had irrevocably shattered. Karma, it seemed, had indeed realized itself. Not through vengeance or retribution, but through the serene acceptance of the past and the embracement of a future unwritten. Nathan's downfall was not my revenge, my happiness was. And as Marcus and I stood together, looking out at the life we had crafted, it was clear the best revenge was, in fact, living well. Our journey hadn't been easy, fraught with pain and heartache, but standing on the other side, I knew with resolute certainty we had triumphed.